Hello everyone. So we're trying again something different. Because why not? I mean, it only makes me late, right? Other than that, we can do whatever we want. Freedom of will. So today we are trying just a backdrop of the tank. It's a still I took yesterday. And we'll see what happens next, you know. Then I've got a video clip to show you as well. Yes, I used a green screen for this part because when I'm in the little circle, it'll be nice to have something different in the background. So yeah, I told all the fish not to move. I said, stay. And they're obeying, it's amazing. All right, hang on, let me update my app really quick with my parameters because I did all my water testing today. So, 5, 420, 1400, 40. See what you guys can guess what I'm talking about. 349. Nope. I'll put it in here too. I don't care. 0.75. 1.025. 78. And 8.05. Done. That looks correct. Save. Why are these things being picky? Oh, this one? All right. I'm just going to delete that. Save. All right. That's done. All right. Sorry to make you wait. I had to enter in all my water tests from today. They are done. And yeah, I know. Nitrates are 40. But, I mean, they were worse, a couple months ago. They were like double that. So it's nice to see they've come down some. So today's topic was requested by someone last week, and they said, where did I put it? We'd love to hear you talk about metal halides versus LED versus hybrid. Do you think halides actually grow corals better? I'm planning a new build and money is no object when it comes to lighting. So I thought we would just kind of talk about that. But before we do that, we need some video. Turn that off. I really need to plug in my Stream Deck and be a little bit more professional, huh? So we will go with this one. So here's some footage of my tank that was filmed yesterday during 10K lighting, so at daylight, which I like. And you don't need a filter, you don't need anything special, you can just enjoy the corals. It's actually what my reef looks like this minute, but the live stream camera never makes it look like this. So that's why I've kind of given up on standing in front of the tank. And so I picked a different spot to stand in because I figured this would be the smart move. And so this video that we're gonna run now is gonna run about an hour. I even found the option in the software to make it loop where I don't even have to hit restart, but let me see if I can pick that now. I don't remember how I saw that. Loop video. All right, done. So now we are good indefinitely. So yeah, 10K lighting. Now let's get into that. So let's talk about lighting. That's the whole point. A lot of people really haven't tried metal halides because they're newer to the hobby and LEDs have been taking over the market for I'd say about the last 8 years. Before that, you had choices of VHOs, very high output bulbs, which were the T12s, which looks a lot like shop light bulbs. And then we had the option of T5s, of course, and we had metal halides. And that was pretty much it. Before that, there was power compacts, which is kind of a weird T5 bulb folded in half with a weird plug on the end that was either 4 prongs in a plus shape or there was 4 prongs in a row straight. And that looked very odd. So you had to make sure you bought the right kind. And if you didn't buy the right kind, you immediately regretted it because you had to take it back because you didn't pay attention and get the one that actually fits the socket of your tank. Now, when it comes to metal halides, it's my preferred choice. I love it. I posted some pictures recently of my lighting. And people are like, when did you switch back? I've never switched away. I love my metal halides. I started running metal halides, I believe, in 2002. And metal halides were, again, they came in a couple of different types. And I just recently saw a third type. I never even knew it existed. Someone up in Canada was trying to buy a used light fixture and it had this really weird bulb. And I was like, well, I don't know where you're going to buy those bulbs. And the light came with some extras, but they were so proprietary. I was like, man, I don't know if you're going to be able to keep finding those for the, for the future. So I didn't recommend she buy that. But typically, you either had a single-ended bulb, which was a solid bulb with a screwed end, which I will show you. Here is one that I've used. It's a Reef Bright bulb, so I can handle it because it's used. That's one of the things that you need to know about metal halides, is that you can't touch the glass because the oils from your skin will actually it'll leave the oil behind, and the bulb can crack just from the light and the heat going through the oily skin on the glass. But here is a metal halide bulb, and here is the socket. I'm going to switch cameras here for a second. We'll hit pause. All right, so we'll go to this one. So here's a metal halide bulb, and this one here is a twin arc. I've been using Reef Bright bulbs now for a decade, and this is the only bulb I use. But before that, I used all kinds of different ones. And this one has two different colors inside the exact same bulb. So when you turn it on, the first bulb that turns on is this one, and it's 10K, which is what you saw in my tank, which is the background I have right now is 10K. The second bulb, or the second arc, when this turns off, this turns on, it would do the 20K, which is the blue that a lot of people like. And so with this bulb, I could each day start my tank with an hour and a half of white light, and then I could turn it off and turn it on with a timer on my apex, and then it would switch to 20K for the duration of the day and give me the pretty coral colors that I like to look at. But it's very important, in my opinion, to have some daylight. And there's been more and more threads where people are being convinced you don't need white light at all. White light's going to lead to algae problems. White light's going to cause all this chaos. It's absolutely unnecessary. Don't use it. Only use blue, and I completely disagree. Blue light is nice. Blue light has its purpose, but there's nothing wrong with white light. Corals that came out of the ocean were under a big, giant sun, and they were getting all the spectrums, but they were obviously getting daylight. And people said, well, if you go deep enough, it's blue. I'm like, well, yeah, to your eye it is, but the way the spectrums move through the water, there's a lot of things that happen, and it also depends how deep you're talking. If you're talking 8 feet, 3 feet, 10 feet, 15 feet, it's still daylight. If you go down 30 feet, it could be more in the blue zone. If you go down 60, 80 feet, everything's dark down there unless the sun is directly overhead shining down really hard on a non-cloudy day. And I've seen all these things because I'm a diver, so I've encountered them. And while it's nice to have blue, it is not the one and only bulb to use. And so no matter what fixture you're using, I don't like to recommend using blue only. So the reason I like the twin arc is because it lets you switch and you're not stuck with one bulb. Because these bulbs, when you put them into their socket and you install them over the tank, I mean, that's it. That's your light. There's no adjusting, there's no dimming. I mean, technically there are ways to do that, but no, we just normally turn them on, enjoy the tank, and then they turn off, and that was the end of the day. So metal halides was and still is my preferred choice of lighting over my reef tank, and I have a pile of brand new bulbs ready to go when I need to change. I've got an extra ballast, which I'll show you. Ballasts, let's see, is there any markings on here? It just says 400 watt. Ballasts are usually pretty big. It's basically like a big old brick. So this one right here is a metal halide ballast. It's 400 watts, also from Reef Bright. All my lighting is Reef Bright. I've made sure everything was the same flavor when it came to hooking up all my lighting, because I discovered when you mix up one ballast with a different company's bulb, sometimes you get some different results. So this is a quick disconnect, and then there's the other end of the wire would then continue up to the fixture where the light, hey, I'm pointing to them. The light's right above me there. So those pendants have a socket that the bulb's screwed into, and then there's a wire that comes out, and this is my quick disconnect. The other end is just a normal plug, and this one's 400 watts. And the reason it's 400 watts is the bulb is 400 watts. The rule of thumb, if you're ever going to go into metal halides, if you so choose, and many of you might say, I'm never going to do this, but if you decide to, it's nice to know, all you have to do is make sure you match the bulb to the ballast always. And I'm not just talking brand, I'm talking about wattage. So you can't get a 250 watt ballast and hook it up to a 400 watt bulb. And then finally, the third part of the equation, because I mentioned the bulb, I mentioned the ballast, I talked about the pendant as well. here is your socket. So this socket is what you would screw the metal halide bulb into, and then there's two wires. There's no ground wire, and it's just on off. And it doesn't even matter which way you wire them. As far as I know, it's always just in and out. So I've always matched them, but if they're backwards, it still turns on the light. So I don't know why. Maybe I'm telling you that incorrectly, but I've never seen a difference when you cross-wired them. But so that is my preferred choice of lighting, and I do recommend it for you guys because it provides a lot of par and it will help your corals really grow. So do they grow corals better? That's debatable. It depends what spectrum you're in. If you were to have 6500 Kelvin bulbs, which were very yellow, the corals would be brown, but boy, would they grow. And then if you put the same corals under a 20K light bulb, 20,000 Kelvin bulb, they are going to grow very slowly and they're going to stay very colorful. But it's a slow growth. So the more daylight, the faster the growth. And it's not a race. I mean, this whole hobby is about patience. But I do want to recommend to you guys to consider that you are running lights that are going to match your desires or your standards. I understand a brand new tank with a pile of rock and a few frags. You're like, I want to grow. I don't want to wait. But it really doesn't matter what light you're using initially because the corals are brand new. And it just takes time for them to grow into what you're looking at in my tank right there. This tank that is in the video is a 400-gallon reef. It's been running for over 6.5 years. And a lot of it grew from little tiny frags that I just didn't touch. I let them grow. I don't frag. I don't sell corals. I just enjoy the reef, and it's my showpiece. And I really enjoy it every single day. I enjoy my pets. And okay, so I talked about metal halides. I briefly touched on T5s. Let's go into that next, because there are people out there that have LED fixtures, but they're thinking about hybridizing by adding T5 bulbs. So I wanted to go into that. Now, T5 bulbs are a skinny fluorescent light bulb, and they typically run pretty hot. So they're hot to the touch, can't handle them when they're on. In other words, you wouldn't change one out while it's on, for example. I don't know why you would change it while it's on, but maybe you were like, I don't like the way the color is, because they come in so many colors that you might have to rearrange the order that they're in above the tank and put a blue one, then a purple, and then a pink, and then a white, and then a 50-50. Mixing those up will give you a completely different effect. It's crazy, but it actually matters in what order from the front of the tank to the back that you use T5 bulbs. But T5 bulbs are a fluorescent bulb, and they just flood the tank with light all the way across so there's no shadows. And then you can have LEDs or metal halides that will give you that pinpoint of light coming down specifically over the tank and hitting, creating hot spots in the reef where the corals can really thrive. Now, there are people that have run only T5 tanks, and they're really pretty, but they lose the shimmer. And the shimmer is something that we really do appreciate in our tanks, as well as if we're in a swimming pool. When you're in a pool on a sunny day and you look at the bottom of the pool and you see those ripples moving across the concrete, the basin of the pool, it's really pretty. And the same thing if you're at a beach or you're near a lagoon, if you're that lucky, and you're looking at, the water's this high off the sand, and it's just rippling, and you can see the ripples moving across the sand, and the sand is so beautiful. That ripple effect, we love that in our reef tanks. And not all lighting can recreate that. T5s definitely cannot. T5s are just like a solid blanket of light that fills in the voids, like I said, but there's no ripple. And so I remember many years ago, man, I don't remember when it was, maybe 2009, 2008, there was a machine that somebody came up with that you would hook up to the top of your aquarium and plug it in, and it had a paddle that would just wiggle back and forth, and it was to make the surface just bounce up and down across the tank to create some artificial ripples. But you saw this little machine thing just going ting, 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 right next to your head. It was, in your field of view. It was not pretty looking. And I don't think it lasted a year. I mean, I never saw it again. I just saw the one-time presentation. So if you are running LEDs, there is also the question of which LEDs are the right ones to buy. Which fixture is the ideal one? And there are many on the market. There are some that have been on the market a long time. There's some that are newer that, there's some that are just knockoffs of the main brands of lighting. But trying to think of who dominates the market. Ecotech is very well known for the radions, and I have radions on my satellite tanks. And there are the AI lights, such as the AI lights have been around a long time, and that's a sister company of Ecotech. There's Kessel, which has a whole line of different lights, and the 360X is a really nice, clean-looking light fixture. I love the look, and I've seen some tanks lit with it, and those tanks looked amazing. And they have it now where you can completely control the light with your phone, just like the Radeon can be done as well. I don't know if AI has that control yet. Maybe they do. I'm not positive. And because originally AI had the AI director, and AI stands for Aqua Illumination, and those had the AI director you had to use to program your lighting. And then when the 360X came out, they created a dongle that you plug in the top, and then I guess via Bluetooth to your phone, or no, it was Wi-Fi. You would be able to communicate, I think it's Wi-Fi. You'd be able to communicate with the light and pick your spectrums you like and create your schedule. So you have those choices there. Now there's the regular LED lights. I had one many years ago. I ran it for a long time. One of the vendors that sold corals was also selling lights. And he had this light fixture that he had private labeled that obviously came from China, and it had 2 power cords. And you plug in one cord and you got blue light. You plug in the other cord, you had white light. So you could plug the white light into a timer and plug the blue cord into a different timer, and you could then choose how you want to run your lights. Maybe start off with some white light for a couple of hours, and then have that timer shut off while the blue one's already on and the blue's on the rest of the day. Maybe you have both come on the whole time, but the blue stays on an extra hour longer after the end. You know, there's that kind of a choice. But you wouldn't physically go up to the light each day and twist the knob to increase or decrease intensity. It was kind of like set it up, find that sweet spot you like, and then just leave it alone and let the timers do their thing. Whether it's mechanical timers or it's a programmable gizmo like the Apex controller. So you have that simple type of light where it's just on and off, and you set it and forget it. If you, now, you know, you guys have seen Dwayne's reef. He has a beautiful SPS reef, and for many years he used the cheap lights that come from China. I think they were like $100 a piece. And he said, you know, he ran all channels at 100% every single day. And he said, I never changed them. I was like, all right, fair enough. And he said, in every single year he'd take each light fixture down, and he had several, and he'd desolder every single LED optic or diode and replace it every year. So if that light had, I don't know, 48 LEDs in it, he had to unsolder and solder in 48 new ones, put that light back up, take the next light down, replace all of them. And he did this every single year with all of his lights. And he did it for many years. And you know, he's a handy guy, but if you are buying a light fixture, do you plan to basically gut it and replace parts every single year? Most people want to have a light that they buy and it's going to last them for many years. And initially, when LED lighting came out, we were told that those lights are going to last you about 5 years. And so if you have a fixture that's lasted 5 years, you've gotten your money's worth. And then, you know, newer ones come to the market and it's your choice of what you want to buy, but you can't just keep running that light indefinitely until the day it stops running, because the par will have dropped off as it gets older and older and older. I mean, just things wear out. They don't last forever. Now, hybridizing an LED fixture like that cheap one, you know, that I was describing, the $100 one, the on and off, by adding something in addition like T5s or the XHOs from Reef Bright, which I know it sounds like I'm selling Reef Bright nonstop. I really like their products. And everything on my tank that's from them is the metal halides, the ballasts, the XHOs on my Refugium, on my Anemone Cube, on my Reef, all of those. I've got Radeons on the Anemone Cube and on the Frag tank. And then I have the pendants did not come from Reef Bright. I've had them for a super long time, 14, 15 years, because they last forever, which is really nice. The pendant is a metal shell. You saw it in the picture before when I showed my background. And it has a glass shield to protect the inside from getting spotted up with any kind of salt damage. And it keeps the bulbs from getting wet, you know, getting splattered, which is really important over a reef tank, because metal halide bulbs are very hot. And there are people that have done really dumb things and burned themselves really badly on their arm or their wrist working around their tank around a metal halide bulb. They're super hot. So the rule of thumb when you're working around those is keep your arm away from it, or wait till it's turned off and then reach in, you know, after it's cooled off for 10 minutes or so. But again, using the XHOs, or like I said, the T5s, will spread out the light. My tank, it was very interesting when I had just the Radeon on the Anemone Cube. The light was coming down from the light, the LED puck. It came down like this. And then when I added the two XHOs shooting in from the sides, it spread it out. And when you looked at the light bouncing off the wall, you could see how the light had spread out more. And a lot more things in the tank got light. And the animals responded immediately because the anemones all started to scatter that had gathered to the middle. They all started moving outwards, and then they started going down the glass, along the back glass to get near the bottom, to get away from that much light because they didn't expect that much with the brand new light being added. But in the meantime, many of them have gone right back out. They like it. And they're like, hey, this stuff's great. What was I thinking? I'm going to go back to that spot. You guys know I sell things from my shop. And I do sell two products from Reef Right, and that's the Live Rock Enhance and the Reef Enhance. I have the ability to sell their lights as well. If there's something you want specifically, you can let me know, and I can take your order from them. But I don't actually have it set up with like their stuff sitting in my shop where you can just pick items. So if there's any desire in that regard, just let me know. Now, what are some basic rules of thumb when it comes to lighting? It's really important, no matter what light fixture you have, that you know how far off the water it belongs. And certain light fixtures might come with like a frame that pops out the side and sits on the tank and might put your light this far off the water. It might be just how it's built. And I'm coming to mind would be like the Marineland LED fixture. They have one that's very thin and long, and it sits on top of the tank. One sec. I'm gesturing, I need my hands. So it sits on top of the tank, and it's got like a wire frame that comes out, and it puts the light, just a little bit above the water. But then like an LED fixture from Radion wants your lights to be at least 10 inches off the water. And but they also offer like a frame that clamps onto the back of the RMS mount, clamps to the tank, and actually puts the light at the height. You don't even have a choice. You can't move it up or down. The Kessel light has a nice clamp that goes on the tank. It's a gooseneck, and you can move it way up, and you can bring it down lower. You can pivot it left or right. I mean, it's very flexible in that regard, where you can choose where you want the light in regard to the water, and you're not stuck at a fixed height. If you're hanging the lights from the ceiling with cables, you're going to, again, the best way to know what to do with your lighting, number one is check what the instructions say. Always do that. And then secondarily, if you own a par meter, you can measure the light intensity, and you can see the difference. You can see when the light is strong. You can see if you're at 600 par, or if you're only at 200 par, and you're like, well, let me lower it. You're like, okay, now I'm up to 350, that's better. And then you're like, oh, I can turn up the intensity up higher. Oh, now I'm up to 550. And then you might want to lift the light up a little bit higher because you're at 550, and then get around to 400 or so. And this is where you're going to do your research, and you're going to find out how much par do you really need. And each time you add a new light to the tank, in addition to the one you already have, par is going to go up to some degree. So the Radion put out a certain amount of light on my Anemone cube. I added two XHO lights that are pure blue light, and like I said, the anemones immediately responded, and some even bubbled up. So I decided, so I know, without even a meter, that the par has gone up in that tank. It's more intense. And if you use T5s, you'll see a bump come up. What if your tank is doing great, but you want to hybridize, you want to add something extra? So you put in, let's say you use T5s, and you increase your light by 10 or 12%. That's still a positive, it's going in the right direction. You're adding a little bit more light. We typically say you can never add too much light to your tank. Now, obviously, there are some caveats. There is the ability to overdo it. But you can always watch the livestock and see how they're doing to know if the light was too intense, if it was running too long per day. But I think what a lot of people think about with light, obviously they like colors, so they want the corals to look a certain color. But I think they also fear algae. And if the tank is blue, you don't see the algae. You just don't see it because a lot of stuff hides in blue. So if you were to switch to white light, you'd see all the sins of your tank, and you may not like it as much. So we want to make sure that we're being realistic and knowing what's actually going on in the tank. And are your light, oops, I'm sorry, that jumped. Let me do this. We'll put it right about there. That's probably where we left off. If you decide to hybridize your lights, you're going to need more plugs for the additional lights you're adding. You're going to need a spot for the additional ballast that those lights need. And so you have to keep this in mind. These are all things you're going to put somewhere in your stand, hopefully in a dry area where they're safe. You may need to add ventilation or remove the heat from ballasts. The newer Radions I haven't got the newest one. I'm waiting for mine to show up, which is probably going to be a couple more weeks. It's the Gen 5. But my Gen 4 Pro has a black power brick, you know, the kind that we have in our, for like charging a computer. And that's completely different from the Gen 2 Radeon that had this metal tower thing with a lot of holes to ventilate. And so it had to be in somewhere where it could really breathe. So when you're choosing your light fixtures, you need to know all the accessories, all the parts it needs. The Kessel light has a power brick. A lot of the overseas lights I was talking about before, the ones that cost $100 or so, those usually are just a power cord that goes right into the wall. There is no power brick in between the light, so there's no conversion, no external conversion of power. And then it comes down to the cost. So, you know, we didn't talk about that. A lot of people are like, oh, if you run metal halides, it's going to make your electric bill go up $100, $200. That's not true. It's not even remotely true. It's not even slightly true. Okay, so I live in Texas. I'm in a 4-bedroom house. I have a reef tank and I have a business I run here, and I'm here all the time. And my electric bill last month for everything, including my AC, which I run hard, was $229. And that's including my reef tank. And then there are months where my electric bill is $160, and where the weather was real mild. And then the real bad summers, you know, it's really hot here, and you know, in the fall, in August, I would say that my bill is probably closer to $289 or so. So what the change of electricity consumption is my AC unit. That's what's really getting me. You know, but that's just is what it is. But mathematically, if you look up the watts of the light you're going to use, like for example, I use 3 400-watt metal halides, so that's 1,200 watts, and each of those bulbs runs about 7 hours a day. So you take your 7 hours a day times 1,200 watts times your kilowatt hour price, you can figure out what it's going to cost to run your lights. I believe my metal halides are somewhere between $16 and $22 a month to run those lights. And that's why I have no qualms running them. I've never did. My very first metal halide bulb that I ever used was 175 watt. And I put it over a 55-gallon aquarium. I put 2 of them over it. And it was okay. It did okay. The corals were alive. But I'd say probably within a year, I decided, okay, no, that's not going to work. I need more pump. I need more light. And so I went ahead and I bumped them up to 250 watts. And I had to buy new ballasts and new bulbs. The sockets, the reflectors were still good, but I had to buy the ballasts and the bulbs. And so that was another cost after I just bought something a year before. But I did buy them used, so, you know, originally. So I saved some money in the first place. But 250 watts was much better. And the way you know how much wattage you need with any kind of light fixture is how tall the tank is. The taller it is, the more wattage you need to punch through the water to get down, all the way down to the substrate, where you have fungias and zoanthids and chalices and acans, you know, all those things you have down low in the tank. Clams, you know, they oftentimes are on the sand. So you need to have enough power down at the bottom to reach those things. When I had my 280-gallon running, which ran for 6 years, I was using, the Reef Bright bulb didn't exist yet. I was using Reflux, or EEF, LUX, and I love that bulb. And I believe it was a 14,000 Kelvin bulb, so it was white with a hint of blue, and it was just a great all-day long light. And I ran that one 250 watt on each end. And then, or actually all 3 of them were 250 watts. And then I had a reef keeper come over and he says, hey Mark, I need you to hold some of my corals, I'm moving out of state. So he said, you know, I've got all these corals, I'm going to bring you some live rock to add to your tank because your tank is full, like always. And that way you have a place to plant your corals, his corals, and I was like, okay, that's fine. But I said, but I only have 250 watt bulbs, I'm not sure what's going to happen. And he said, well, I'm going to do is I'm going to bring over a 400 watt ballast and bulb for you, and we're going to put it right in the middle of your tank, and it's really going to cook the hot spot in the middle, and it's going to provide light for everything. So when he showed up, you know, he brought the corals and he brought the light. He brought this DIY apparatus that I swear I thought was going to burn my house down. It was some kind of a metal box you get at Home Depot with a big door you lift off, sort of like an ammo case, but it was not for ammo, it was electrical. And inside was this ballast that wasn't bolted down, it was just loose in there, and there was a capacitor, and there was wires that looked really, really cooked, and then there was a wire coming out the side, and there was another wire coming out the other side, and that was, and when you plugged it in, you could hear it humming, just, and I was like, what? And he was like, that's what you use. And I, you know, that ballast was nothing like this one. This is, to me, is a ballast. I'm sorry, I get DIY, but certain things I really prefer if they're just made for the hobby and not rigging together my own. But you know what? That was just how things were back then. And people would buy parts at electrical supplies, and they would get capacitors at Home Depot or Lowe's, and they'd cobble it together and they'd create light. And nowadays, of course, we have options everywhere to get any kind of light you want, and you're getting flooded with different vendors and ideas and opportunities. So, it's like I said, it's different now. But I always gravitate toward the nicer stuff. It looks cleaner, it tends to run more quietly, and it's efficient, and it lasts a long time. That's why I like to go that route. There are always ways to save money and spend less, but you may have to tinker with it more to keep it operational. So that's something that cannot be ignored. It's just a reality. It'd be nice if you could have it cheap and last forever, but typically that's not how things work. So I talked about, and then the heat that comes off of metal halide bulbs I mentioned was really hot. Not only will it burn you, it can cook the surface of your water and make your tank warmer. So when everyone was running metal halides, they all had to run chillers. And lots of people have LED lights now. They're not running metal halides, and they don't need chillers necessarily. Some people do, but most don't. And they actually found that with their LEDs, they have to run heaters more. So they went from chilling the water because it was getting too hot to heating the water because it doesn't get hot enough. And I was in a chat group, I think the Neptune group, not too long ago, a few months ago, and they were making some kind of comments about how LEDs do add heat to the water, and I was just kind of astounded. I don't find that to be the case. I've got some LED fixtures here. I've got the Radions, and I couldn't put my hand under there. I don't feel the heat. They have a cooling fan that blows up. I don't believe that any of the LED lights are going to add heat to my aquariums like a heater will. So I was really surprised when they said, oh yeah, you get some heat off of LEDs. So, you'll have to find out what is fact from fiction with your own experience, of course, as you buy things and install them. And you definitely want to keep everything in the sweet spot. You don't want to make a mistake and allow your reef to get away from you. So you have to keep measuring things. That's why we have Water Test Saturday. And, I tell you guys, test everything. I tell you every single week. And, a lot of you do, and I'm really proud of you. And there's some of you that don't, and I'm not proud of you. I'm just not. Because then what happens is, X amount of weeks goes by, something's not right in your tank, you pull out your test kits, and you come to Club Meals Reef, and you're like, hey, there's something wrong with my coral, and here's my parameters. And these are like the first parameters you've taken in months. And, so of course we look at the numbers like, well, you could change this or adjust that or whatever. But, if you are testing your water every single week, if you're measuring your PAR once or twice a year, if you're keeping up with the temperature of your tank around day and night to kind of see where things go, you can dial everything in to the way it should be. Look, surprise, a different clip. I filmed the anemone cube for you guys 2 nights ago. And this is during the blue phase. I believe this is with the XHOs on as well as the Radion. And I'm using the Coral Lab, the Polyp Lab Coral View lens to filter out the blue. And these are a bunch of my anemones, as you can see. And there's Dory, and there's quite a few clowns. A lot of times when you look in my tank, you don't see the clownfish unless they come out to eat. And this was getting close to that time when I was going to feed the tank. And so, the clowns are getting a little bit more active and ready to eat. There's probably about 12 in that tank. There's some little tiny ones that have no color at all, which is crazy because they're just as old as the rest. And then there's others that are much darker. And Tammy's the one that raised them, and she raised them from eggs. And she called them Cappuccino Clownfish, I believe, is her nickname, because they're kind of in the brown family. But and then there's one bright orange clownfish in there. That's Mama. She's the one that was in that tank by herself before I introduced all of these other ones from Tammy. So you'll be seeing this tank from a few more angles for like the next 20 minutes or so. Okay. Some of the workarounds for tanks that get too hot from your lighting, no matter what you use, whether it's T5s, LEDs, metal halides. The choice I love always is cooling fans. I mean, it's my de facto choice. It's less expensive, less obtrusive, and can just tackle it. And it can bring your tank temperature down 1 or 2 degrees day in after day, day after day, day in, day out. And so I do like cooling fans if you have the room for them, and I prefer if you can install them on top of the sump, blowing down onto the sump water. But you could put them up in the top of the tank, blowing across the surface of the water to blow the heat away from the lights that are hanging above. And so you have that option as well, which is a nice way to kind of blow the heat away and avoid the tank getting hot in the first place. So if you're running, because T5 bulbs get really warm, and T5 bulbs normally need to be about 7 inches off the water. If you have them any closer, you're definitely going to heat the tank. And like I said, there are some light fixtures out there that have very short legs, and they pretty much put the lights maybe 2 inches off of where the glass would be if you had a glass top. And it's crazy close to the tank, and it's just not right. I mean, I guess I understand why the vendor sells it that way, because it's a lot easier to sell you a very simple light you pull out of the box and stick on top of your tank, and you're done. But when you're a reef keeper, we want to dial things in. We like precision. We want the flexibility and the ability to get things exactly the way they need to be. And general rule of thumb, T5s need to be 7 inches off the water. Metal halides have to be 9 inches to 12 inches off the water. The Radion, I believe, has to be 10 inches off the water. The Kessel, I don't remember the height. AI has their own legs to hold it up, whatever that measurement is. It looks like about 10 inches to me as well. And then there's the Kessel AP 800. It came out years ago, and now I heard they're coming out with a new one, a newer version. So these all will have recommendations. And so you want to get them at the right height. You want to make sure they're nice and secure so they cannot fall in the water. And you want to make sure they don't get splashed. Because if you have lights that get splashed, they can short out and potentially cause an electrical fire. So it's really important that your lighting, no matter what you're using, is that everything's tied up and tethered. Like when I added the hybrid kit to my Radion from Reef Bright, I now have 3 power cords come off the light. And I took zip ties and I tied them together in multiple places. So I basically had this power trunk going down behind the tank. And then I used one of those sticky pads that have, it's like a plastic thing. I love these things. They come with the Vortex. And so I buy them in bulk now. But they have a sticky part on one side and it's a plastic thing with holes in the other. And you glue it to the tank and you put the wire against it and you put a zip tie around that and clamp it on. And that way it supports the weight of the cable so your light doesn't hang crooked, because you're kind of lifting the heavy cable up, you tie it to the tank and it stays. And so I do recommend those for everything. I was talking to my friend AJ a couple days ago, and I was telling him how I was working under my reef recently, and I have migrated from what I used to do. So like, for example, I used to have a really big, heavy light over my refugium that probably weighed, I don't know, 15 pounds, 20 pounds, and it had 2 stainless steel cables. And those cables, they did fine, but the rollers and the guides and the bolts were all rusting. And it just was disgusting. And I kept saying, I need to replace those, I need to replace those, I need to do it. And then eventually I decided, you know what, I want to just get rid of that light. I've had it for too many years, and I knew that it was past its shelf life. So I asked Tulio at Reef Bright, can you make me a light that's white for my refugium, which he did. And it's an XHO, and then I hung it with fishing line, and I think you guys have seen that in a previous video. So the fishing line I use, a 50-pound test, it's pretty thick. I mean, I'm not a fisherman, but it's definitely thicker than what I've seen in the past when I went fishing a couple of times. And I figured 50-pound test can handle a light that weighs 5 pounds with no problem, especially when you're hanging it from 2 points. That's like 2.5 pounds per side. So I have this light fixture that is, you know, the full length of my tank. And then there's a fishing line here, and there's a fishing line here going up. And then I did a thing to where I can pull a wire and it lifts the light up, and then I can loosen it and move it over and it comes back down. And I really like that system, and it cost me nothing. And when I got done, I thought, you know, I could use fishing line for other things. So I have the new plumbing that goes to the algae turf scrubber. And it goes from a valve through some flexible tubing all the way around to the back of the turf scrubber. And that tubing would sag with the weight of the water. So I thought, well, you know, I could use fishing line to lift it up. So if you look under my tank now, because it's fishing line, you don't see it, but it looks like a Puppet Master's stage, because there's all these strings coming down everywhere holding things up. Each one has its own piece of fishing line. And it's working great. So if you're looking for a way to tie things down, tether things up, those sticky pads are really handy. For anything that's, you know, stuck under the aquarium stand, you know, up high on the top on the wood, I put a screw That's exactly the thickness of my board. So my board is 3/4 inch. I get a 3/4 inch screw, and I put it through the sticky pad to hold it there permanently. It's not going to come out. And then I can put my fishing line on there, and I can tie whatever it is I'm going to tie beneath it. And it just allows me to put things exactly where I want them, and secure them where they're not going to fall any further into my system. And you can, adjust the length of those fishing lines to get everything hanging exactly nice and straight and perfect. And I know it sounds a little bit crazy, but it's inexpensive, it's easy to work with, you can cut it with scissors, and it lasts forever. And if it weren't to last forever, if it were to, I don't know, stretch out over time, I bought a spool that's probably 500 yards. I can always take a new 6-foot piece off the spool and tie a new piece on there for a while. So, yeah, I'm a huge fan of the fishing line. On the frag tank, there are 2 radions hanging, and both radions are held up with fishing line. So, you guys can decide if you want to go that route or not. Now, I want to throw this up on the screen right quick, even though I still have some coffee left. Hang on. Last week, on the stream, I had someone pressure me to do some drinking. So Dave said that he really enjoys the streams and that he wanted me to go buy myself a bottle of Crown Royal, and he says I had to prove it on the stream. So yesterday, I went out and risked my life, daring COVID-19 to catch my lungs, and I went and bought myself a new bottle of Crown Royal Reserve. So that's for today. And thank you very much, Dave. This is my preferred drink. I saw a new one out there that I hadn't seen before. Oops, there we go. So I'd seen another one on the market that was new called XO. And I asked the guy, I said, well, what's the difference between Reserve and XO? So he didn't know, and he looked up the reviews. And he said to me, well, according to one reviewer, XO is like putting your head down inside a bag of Halloween candy and just breathing that in. The XO Crown Royal apparently is super crazy sweet, which I wouldn't like. So normally, when you do Crown, you would have some ice inside your glass and maybe some Coke. But I didn't bring any ice over here because I know I'd be talking for an hour and the ice would be a puddle of water. So thank you very much, Dave, for the shot, we can say. I did get some Coke because I knew the Coke would cool it down a little bit. But Crown Royal Reserve is a very smooth drink. It's actually the kind you can just appreciate for what it is with nothing in it. And so I really like it. But I picked up some Coke at the same time to add to this. So Crown and Coke for Saturday for the stream. You guys just like me better when I'm on alcohol than when I'm on coffee. So cheers. What are you guys drinking today? I know you're watching a stream while you're holding a beer. I want to know what you're drinking. Pull this off the screen. We'll go back to the video. And then very shortly here, whoops, that's wrong. Resume last video. And then, we're going to be going into the question and answer part here very soon. Make sure you're using @MeLovesReef when you write your question so I can see it. Because I go through the chat and there's so many of you guys talking, and sometimes you're all talking to each other, and I'm trying to find those questions between all of that chatter. And it's a little easier if you do that, so please do that. Something new that arrived this week, just a couple days ago, is the latest issue of Coral magazine. So this one is about ICP testing. Oh, I'm trying to get it in frame. This one's all about ICP testing. I haven't read it yet. I mean, I literally got it, and I believe I got this before I got my personal subscription. These are the ones for the shop. So I'm selling these in my shop. I only order 6 each issue because I didn't know how many of you would actually buy it. An issue is $8. You can throw it in your box with the other things you're buying, or I can ship this for $5. Shipping the padded envelope, not padded, the envelope and the shipping is about $5 for this magazine, believe it or not. But I'm looking forward to reading the latest about ICP testing because a lot of us are doing ICP testing these days. And so I really want to hear what they have to say. So I'm looking forward to that. That will probably not be one I'll read online. You're going to have to get the issue. But They have a printed subscription, and they have a electronic subscription. And one person recently posted on my business page, said, "Hey Mark, you know, I was a digital subscriber, but I switched to the printed because I like it better, you know, to hold the magazine in my hand." And I understand that. I mean, the pictures are actually really good in the magazine. Normally pictures look better on a screen than they do, but I really enjoy the magazine. I mean, I've been a subscriber now for, I don't know, almost a decade, and I got a lot of issues. So, yeah, I think that was everything I had that was new to talk about this week. Oh, I got one more thing to share with you guys. How am I going to do this? Shall we share it from my phone? Because this is timely. I did this yesterday. Oh, matter of fact, how do I do this? No, let's do this. So, yesterday, I'm trying to find the first picture. This will have to do. Let's do this. Switch to, no, switch to, that's not it. Where is it? Why can't I? Oh, here we go. I was like, I can't find it. So this is the screen in my turf scrubber. And you can see all the algae that's been growing. This is one side of that sheet. And then this is the other side. Look at that. Okay. So now, let me find the little video I did, because it's further down. And, okay, hang on. So this one here might have audio on it. I don't know if I talked or not. No, I can stop the audio, good. Here we go. So here is the turf scrubber box. It's like a drawer that comes out, and you can see the screen. Pretty disgusting, huh? And that was after it had been sitting out for a few hours on the floor because I didn't have time. I was packing orders. I was like, okay, I need to clean this thing out. And the bottom was filled with algae. And actually inside the turf scrubber was algae too. So let's see. Here is some of the algae that I took out. A handful. Pretty gross, huh? Okay, so the turf scrubber is now finally kicked in. I've got one more video to show you guys after I cleaned it out. It's just, oh, I wanted to show you this thing because it was really odd. I didn't expect it. And I actually asked the guy that makes it. His name's Jason. I said, why is the bottom of the drawer clear? And I'll show you why I was wondering that. Because if you look at this picture, this right here is the bottom of the box, and you can see there's algae growing in the bottom of the turf scrubber. I actually took my phone and stuck it inside the turf scrubber and pointed it down, and took this shot. So there's all this algae down in the bottom underneath the drawer. And I thought, well, if the bottom of the box was a solid color, there would be no light down there. The algae would stay in the box and not be in this thing down here. Because I had to take a credit card and kind of scrape all this stuff away. But that's, you can see right there how it looked like inside there. So it's, a little bit gross, but it's literally growing algae with no problem whatsoever, which is kind of neat. And I wanted to show you that. And then I told you guys I had one more I wanted to show you. Eventually I'll have to make a video about this thing, huh? But, oh, hang on. It's starting without you. Hang on, hang on. Right here, pause. Okay. So here is the turf scrubber itself from Foursquare Aquatics. They have an Instagram page. And I pulled out the drawer. And so there's the screen after I cleaned it. It's already cleaned out. And I wanted to show you the water inside coming down. So 1 second here. I was trying not to spill any water on the floor. That's the water raining down. And it rains down right on top of the screen in the drawer. That's why I love this thing. It's so neat because you can keep it running, and when you put the drawer back in, it becomes quiet. Now, the only thing that you hear of this thing, it's not really the water coming out of it that you hear. What you hear are the cooling fans on the LED lights, which I hate. I really don't like that. But if your aquarium is closed up with a cabinet, I've been told you don't hear it. And that's great. And I'm running my lights on my anemone cube, on my turf scrubber for 12 hours, from midnight 30 to 12:30 or lunchtime 30 every single day. Let me go back to the video, and then we'll start doing your questions. Resume last video. Here we go. So right now, the XHOs are off. That's only radon light that's shining on the tank right now. And you can see some of the anemones up high. Right there in the middle of the picture, I don't know if you guys can see my mouse pointer when I do this stuff on the screen, but where those green anemones are, that is the lock line where the water comes out, and they are all masking it or covering it up. And then the water flows out the tip of the lock line between all those tentacles. The tank gets dimmer and dimmer. It's not me making it darker and darker. This is because it was getting close to lights out, which coincidentally was close to when I feed the tank. So I actually had to hurry up and get some food ready around this point of the recording because the radions were already dimming down significantly, getting ready to wrap up for the night. I hope you guys are enjoying the video background. I thought this would be a nice, a much nicer approach. I've had several of you comment and send me messages saying that they really like this better. And I know some of you guys listen to this while you're driving instead of watching it, so you're really missing out. Because this, I think, is going to really be the direction I go with this channel now on the live streams. I think I'll just keep putting myself in a circle and throwing myself on the screen when I have to show you something, so you guys have something nicer to look at. And, you know, I told you guys last week I wouldn't make a new video. I was just going to regurgitate the one I did last week because, you know, it's a lot of time to make this. But got excited, and I just filmed some more for you guys because I wanted to show the anemone cube. So probably next week, you'll get last week's video again. And then in 2 weeks, you'll get this video again. So, all right. So I think that's everything I wanted to talk about. So let's start looking at your questions. See what I can do for you. Let's see. Let's start with this one. And remember, if you're asking a question, do add Milo's Reef. Now I've scrolled way back in the chat, so you know, no points against you. I'm just reminding you guys. 508 Fisher says, "What is the reason we are supposed to rinse off frozen fish food? I was just informed that could be why I have hair algae." Hair algae comes from light and nutrients and a lack of a cleanup crew. And so you want to make sure you're not running your lights too long. You want to make sure that your tank water parameters are good. And you want to have a lot of cleanup crew in your tank. And I feel like that's the one area lots of people fail at. I mean, honestly, fail. Because they don't put enough cleanup crew in there. They're so worried about pests. They're so worried about everything. Or they don't want to spend the money. They don't buy the hermit crabs, they don't buy the snails, and then they say, why do I have algae? And you gotta have a cleanup crew. On my website, on milosreef.com, you go to CUC, cleanup crew. There's an article with a bunch of different critters you can use in your tank that will help keep things cleaned up. Now, my parameters as of right now today is phosphates we're measuring 0.75, and I know you guys all want to be like 0.03. 0.75, yes. And I got a story about that too. But anyway, that's the truth. It's 0.75. It's high. And my nitrates are 40. And my tank is not filled with algae. So how is that? It's because I have fish that eat whatever they can on the rocks, and I've got a cleanup crew. Both tanks have cleanup crews that work on it, but you don't see algae. Now I want to show you guys another picture, because this is a really weird thing. And then I'm going to tell you my story about the phosphate test kit. But this is really, really strange. So I've got 3 pictures I want to show you guys. We'll start with this one. So let me hit pause on this really quick, and then we'll continue. So this right here is a coral that died in my tank about a month ago. This was the Dreamweaver from Dwayne. That was beautiful. It was 4 different colors, and I watched it go up in smoke. It basically turned green like that coral to the right, and it died. And I was just like, man, how did that happen? Why did that happen? What's different? You know, it was really annoying. It was the only coral, and this one little colony went up in smoke. And if you look right there, there's a little bit of bubble algae inside there, and you can also see the arms of some little brittle starfish. Brittle starfish are good guys. You don't have to fear them. Also up here is a hermit crab working his way through the dead skeleton. Now, the next picture, you can see it a little bit better. And the thing that caught my eye, that fascinated me, now underneath, you're looking at, that's a bird's nest in the background. That's not the same coral. Oh, there's an Asterina there too. The thing that's interested me, this picture was taken a few days ago. And then I gotta show you one more picture. I gotta find it first because they're not in order. This one here I took from above yesterday. So here is that same coral. And this coral has been dead in my tank for a month. And instead of it turning into an algae farm with hair algae just wafting off of it, instead it's covered with coralline. And there's cleanup crew kind of working its way through. And the only reason that bubble algae is there is because Spock can't get to it. If she could get her mouth in there, that would be eaten because she loves bubble algae. But I found it fascinating. I've never ever seen an acro die in a reef tank and not end up growing algae. And my tank has nitrate and phosphate, so you would think I totally deserve to see this thing turn into a hairy ball of mess. But it's not. And that's very, very interesting to me. So I want to show this to you guys because, I mean, obviously I'm going to cut this out and get it out of the tank and put some new pretty corals in that spot. I just haven't gotten my arm wet yet. But if you are seeing algae in your tank, odds are it's not because you didn't rinse your fish food. It's usually because you just don't have enough cows in there mowing down the algae. And that's really important that you have a cleanup crew. So we'll go back to the video, and then I'm going to tell you my story. So the crazy thing that happened, I noticed my phosphates were going up. And I would dose phosphate RX, and the phosphates, should go down after that because the water got cloudy and the skimmer pulled stuff out. And then I test my phosphates again, and they were still up. And they were really up. They were like the wrong color up, if that makes any kind of sense. The test is supposed to be clear if you have no phosphate, and it heads into the blue, and the bluer it is, the worse your phosphates are. Well, for the last few weeks in a row, I had to take the beaker, and it mixed up, it looked okay, but when you put it down on the card, it looked really blue. And I was like, this has never done this before. It's super strange, I don't understand it. If I lifted the vial off the card up into the air, I could then look through it and kind of get an idea of what the phosphates were, which, 0.5, 0.75, somewhere in there. But if I put it down on the card, it was like 300, or whatever the high number would be. And I was like, this makes no sense. Why is it doing that? So today I'm testing my water. And I don't know how I noticed it, but I'm glad I finally did. The phosphate test kit has two tiny little eyedropper bottles, and one says A and one says B. And I'm looking at the B bottle, and on the B bottle, it doesn't say PO4. It said Ca, calcium. I'm like, oh man, I actually swapped two bottles from two different test kits. So I've been using bottle A of phosphate, bottle B of calcium for my phosphate test. And that's why I was getting this weird color. So then I thought, oh, well, let's test phosphate now with the correct A and B bottles. And I did, and it was still 0.75. But it wasn't the crazy blue. It was more realistic blue. I'm like, all right, at least I'm on to something. So I will go ahead and I'll knock it down with some phosphate RX again. But I just was thinking, man, does anyone else make that kind of mistake? I try to always put all the bottles from one kit back in its box, take the next box out and use that. I'm not sure how I swapped the two, but I did it weeks ago. And every single week since then, I've been testing with a wrong reagent and getting this weird result, and I didn't catch it. So it's kind of like a learn from me. I made an oops, and you don't want that to happen to you. So make sure that you've got all the right bottles with each of your kits so you don't get some inaccurate results that may make you do something that could hurt your reef. Fortunately for me, as I told you in last week's stream, I don't fear phosphate. I never think about it. I just don't care. And if it's up, it's up. If it's down, it's down. But it's not something I stress about. I worry way more about alkalinity than I do phosphate. So when I saw it was up, I was like, okay, that's weird. I'm not really sure why. I'm running this turf scrubber. I got a refugium. The tank, the glass isn't turning green. I mean, what is going on? This is so strange. But I just kind of let it ride. I didn't make a knee-jerk reaction. And that's something we talked about in a stream probably last year where I was like, don't overreact. Remember that one? Let's talk about not overreacting. It's so important to just kind of look at where things are and look at the livestock. See how it's doing. Look at this video. See how they're doing. Are they normal looking? Are they all balled up and tiny? Are the fish gasping? What's happening? And if everything in the tank is essentially normal, but you just have this weird result, maybe look and see what you might be doing wrong. In my case, I mixed up two bottles. But it could be the test kit has expired, or It could be you just need to get a new test kit because that one no longer is accurate for whatever reason. Maybe it got too hot sitting on top of your lights, or something like that. So throw that. I just want to put that in your head so you had something to consider, because that does happen to all of us, including myself. But no, so that was a long answer to 508 about should we rinse our fish food. I don't. I melt my fish food in tank water for about 15, well, it depends how much of a hurry I'm in, but usually about 15 minutes. And then I start putting it into the tank. And you'll see me feeding here in a few more minutes on this video. I don't know, maybe 10 minutes. And I put all that juice in my tank. And I never, in all these years, I've ever wanted to rinse it out, because the food that melted and then became a slurry and made the water kind of cloudy inside the bowl of fish food, that's microfood for something to inhale, like the anemones or the corals in my reef tank. So I melt it with tank water and I pour it in the reef. And if you're having algae problems, my recommendation to you is going to be beef up the cleaning crew. All right. Jessica asked me, have you been getting your nitrates down since the Spock's vet visit suggested? Well, they're down to 40, so that's half of where they were. So yeah, I'd say yes, I am. Derby City Reefer says, I got Reef Trace the other day and it will not let me load more than 3 parameters. I use Android. I don't use Android, so I don't know the answer, but it may be that you haven't selected enough of the parameters as favorites. You have to add all the ones you like. That's what I do on mine. And then you have to also look and make sure you've selected them to see them. You might be entering all the different parameters, but then you're only seeing 3 results, when you're done, and you want to be able to see all of the ones. So that's why you have a little heart next to each one to pick the ones you want. And if none of that helped you at all, eventually I'll do a video that does a tour of the Reef Trace app. But in the meantime, you can always reach out to the people at Reef Trace and they will help you. They have a Facebook page. You can go on there, you can ask your questions. They are very good about answering, and they like to add new things to the app based on your recommendations. Cindy says, I finished up a water change. Should I test the water later this evening? I normally don't. I usually test, well, here's what I test. I test the tank, and then I test the new water. And if they match, I just do my water change and I'm done. I don't check the water after the water change because, if anything, it should be better than what it was before the water change. But if it makes you feel good and you want to, you can. It's always good to give it a good long while. I forget who said, somebody said something in Club Miller's Reef this week, and it caught my eye. This is the group. It's on Facebook. And inside that group, he said, I made a mistake of testing my water 20 minutes after I fed the tank. And that I believed. Yeah, that'll be a terrible time to test your water. Even when I'm about to test my water and I'm about to feed my reef, and I might even have the food in one hand, I'll grab a glass out of the cabinet and I'll scoop out a glass of water and put it on the counter and then go feed my reef so that I have the untainted water that hasn't been hit with fish food. So yeah, if you want to test just to make sure everything's okay, you can. And it's also important to, when you're testing, not to test right around the time when your system is being dosed with alkalinity or calcium, because that could throw off some measurements as well. So if anything's trickling in the tank, give it another 20, 30 minutes to kind of dissipate and then test your water. Anfield Frag says, tests are done. My salinity is down from 1.026 to 1.025. And yes, that is okay. That's nothing to worry about. Let's see. Since we were talking about cleanup crews, I'll mention this to Dan says, I'm setting up a 45 gallon. What do you recommend? I would recommend, now the tank is new. You're setting it up. That means it's not up yet. You're going to, or you're in the process of, so it's a very young tank, so there's not much for the cleanup crew to eat. But I'd say about 3 months into the tank, as it's established, the lights are running, you're doing your water changes, it's around that point you want to add the cleanup crew, because now you've got fish and corals, a few frags, and you're feeding those fish every day, and now you need the cleanup crew. And I really do emphasize you guys to go with a lot. And there's people out there that dispute this with me, and I understand. You can dispute it all you want. I have a clean tank, and it's working. But, yeah, sorry, I don't want to come across the wrong way. I don't want you to struggle. I want you to be okay. So consider aiming for 1 critter per gallon when it comes to cleanup crew. So if you have 45 gallons, you want 45 critters. That could be 25 hermit crabs and 10 snails, that's 35. And then some other things like an urchin, a sand conch, one only, a serpent starfish, maybe 5 or 6 Necerius to work through the sand bed, and that's your 45 critters. And your tank will stay nice and clean. And I didn't even mention emerald crab. So, I mean, that would be my suggestion to you. Cody, welcome to the live stream. And I'm glad you're excited. I get excited too. I actually woke up today with I felt like I had a hangover, and it wasn't. It was completely my neck. You know, it was just, I was like, oh. I woke up on my belly, and my head was turned sideways, and that's all it took to ruin my neck. And I took pain pills. I went for a 30-minute walk. You know, I did some stretching. You know, I tried everything. And I was like, wow, I got to do the live stream in 2 hours. I got to get rid of this headache. And it finally eased up. You know, here we are, and all is well in the world. But yeah, it's frustrating, you know. I'd love to get a surgeon in there to fix me. Next year. Jamie says, I did a water test today. I recently started doing Nopox. My nitrates have come down a little bit, but my phosphate has completely disappeared. Should I be worried? Yes, you need some phosphate. So if you have knocked out your phosphate completely, you need to start dosing some phosphate to maintain a little bit of it. Because tanks that are stripped of nitrate and phosphate, it seems like so many end up with dinoflagellates. And we don't want your tank to get to that point. We want to catch it before the dinos can take hold. So I would look into whatever you can, Google it all you want, and find out what people are using to dose for phosphate to raise the level. And you only want to dose a little bit. You know, I'm not trying to get you to 0.75 like mine. I'm trying to get you to 0.03, 0.05, something nice and low, but exists in your tank. Andy says, my tank has been very cloudy for about a week now. What has caused it, and how can I fix it? I don't know what you did, but I would think partly what you may need to do is consider using a UV. And a UV has to be rated for your size aquarium, and water will flow through the UV chamber where there's a bulb that will burn off any bacteria that's in the water, and it will help clear the water. I don't use a UV, I never have. And if I did, I'd use it on a quarantine tank, not on a reef tank, but some people swear by them. And this could be a good tool to own in your possession that you only need occasionally. And you can run the UV, maybe you can rent one. Maybe the fish store will let you rent one for a week or so and just get your water back on track. Or you can just wait it out till the bacterial bloom passes, assuming it is a bacterial bloom. It could be that. It could be you used a certain type of sand, and when you added the salt water and everything, it just became a cloud, and it's taking a while. Believe it or not, there are people that have had the cloudy tank and thought it was the water, and ended up being a film on the glass, and when they cleaned their glass, a lot of it was gone. Like, oh, it wasn't nearly what I thought it was. It was me looking through a clouded glass. So, you know, clean your glass, but what you see is what you see. You know, kind of a cloudy tank. And if that's the case, you're going to want to remove whatever is causing the cloud. And UV is one of the best ways to do it. Another method would be to use some kind of a very fine filter, like a 5-micron sock. You could rely on a protein skimmer. You could do some water changes. And what was the last thing I was thinking of? Something. Oh, running carbon. Carbon absorbs stuff, and it could absorb something. But I'm going to kind of guess you're dealing with bacteria. And so if it's a bacteria, UV might be your best bet. Someone's name here is Mr. DKH. I like that. Let's see. Derby City Reefer says, do T12 bulbs have any benefit? There were people that loved the VHO bulbs. I used the VHO superactinics, and I ran them forever until I got the XHOs. And I had the XHOs brand new in the box in my house for at least 6 months, if not longer. And Tulio from Reef Bread would say, Mark, did you install them yet? I'm like, no, I love my VHOs. And he goes, Mark, I'm telling you, you're gonna be blown away. And I just kept saying, oh. But I knew I had to switch because I could no longer find VHOs. And every time I mention that, people say, oh, you can get them here, here, and here. When I went looking for VHOs, they were not anything I could find. They were just unavailable. And I, if I found them, it was like in California. And it's not like I can take a 6-foot fluorescent light bulb on the airplane with me to come home. So I was like, I have to start considering a change. And I just hated switching. But then I made the switch, and I love my XHOs. They are amazing. I cannot undersell them. I mean, they are fantastic bulbs, LED fixtures. And mine run every single day. I have them on staggered schedule too. So everything in my tank is staggered. And even at the end of the day, when the lights are, the metal halides are off, and then the XHOs are the only ones on, and then I have one XHO turn off, but the other one's still on for another 30 minutes, just a little bit more glow, and then finally, click, it goes off and the tank is dark. But, like now in this video, you can see how dim the anemone cube is. It's super dim. The reef is still being lit with XHO lighting right there. All right. Ruben says, I have a foxface rabbitfish in quarantine right now, and it's constantly trying to fight with its own reflection on a bare bottom glass. Any suggestions on what I could use to cover it up? Maybe reduce the lighting in the room that the quarantine tank is in, could kind of reduce the reflection that you're looking at. See, I am about to feed the tank, I believe. Your fish is seeing its reflection, it is fighting. It can't really hurt itself against glass, so that part is good. But I could understand why that would distress you and make you be concerned. Maybe create some hiding spots or put some things in the quarantine tank to break up the reflection it's seeing so it can't see it as well. You can put in PVC pipe or whatever. You said the bottom, it could even be the side walls they see the reflections in, and then they fight. Surf Zone says, have you ever considered a sulfur denitrator for your high nitrates? I did consider it. I even picked one up, I borrowed one from a friend, but at the time when I got it, I tested my water and my nitrates were 2. And I said, well, I don't need this thing, so I gave it back. Big mistake. I shouldn't have returned it. Neo Geo says, I got some pods from reef cleaners and the water is yellowish. Is that okay to add to my tank? Maybe. I mean, it could be that's food in the water to keep the pods alive. It could be some phytoplankton that they put in there or something. Phyto is typically green, but there is another one called Tetrasomus, which is kind of yellowish, and it could be some type of food. You could pour the pods through, through a net, but you may lose some unless it's a really fine net. But of course, you could just contact Pod My Reef and ask them what they say. But odds are it's going to be okay. It's just a small amount compared to your entire aquarium. 508 says, how do you exhaust the heat from the metal halide fixture? There were a couple of tricks that were used in the old days. One of them, I remember this guy in California, I think, he had metal halide, and he ran a duct, like a tube, like you'd see on a dryer, from one halide to the next, and then from that one to the next, and then from that one to a fan that sucked it right out of his house. And so he was sucking the hot air out of all 3 lights through one fan. I thought that was pretty brilliant. I've seen others that would have a canopy around their metal halide lighting, and they'd put a duct on the side, and they'd run the tube up and out of their house to, again, pull the heat out. It was always a method of trying to get rid of it. My canopies, I mean, the 280 was a wide open room behind the tank, so that wasn't a factor. Plus, there was an AC in that room. The 400 gallon is a even bigger room now, so it's even more of a, more cubic feet of air, so the heat isn't really a factor. Cooling fans blowing through the area or even opening the cabinet doors a little bit during the heat of the day is a way to kind of vent out some heat. And then you can always put fans on the ends of the canopy blowing in toward the lights to force in cool air from the room. It'll force the heat out the back of the canopy. So that's one of the methods that we use. Let's see. My coral morale lay hay. I can't even say it. My cool morale lay hay. What are you saying? Am I cussing in another language? Said, what about using solar tubes? Some people have done that. I know a guy in Florida that did it, and he had a really interesting tank, and he had 3 of those tubes coming down from the roof, bringing in sunlight. But that light is, it's not consistent. The weather changes constantly. The cloud cover comes in. You won't just get this much this much PAR constantly all day long. It could go up and down. And there was a guy in California had a huge light vent coming down. It was like 8 feet by 4 feet and 16 feet tall and lined with like reflective material, so it just ricocheted all the way down to the tank. And that tank was filled with algae. I mean, it was really bad, and he was super frustrated with his tank. So, and we never could help him really resolve it. It just was an ongoing battle. I don't know what cleanup crew would have solved that one. But the solar tubes do work, But I know some people, even if they use those, they supplement with more lights around the openings of the tubes to still put light in the tank, especially when the end of the day happens. You know, the sun sets at 6:30 or 7:30 or whatever, and the tank's dark. So they added more lights to keep the lights on for like, you know, till 9 or 10 o'clock at night. I'm looking for the next question. You guys enjoy my fish eating. Hey, Andrea, it's your birthday. Happy birthday. Glenn Smith says, I just changed all my ATI T5 bulbs to 6 white and 2 blue. With more white color spectrum, can I keep the par and time duration the same, or do I need to lower the time with more whites? It depends how long you're running your lights already as it is. You know, if you're running them 10 hours a day, especially with brand new bulbs, it's always smart. Any new bulb, you know, new T5, new VHO, new metal halide, it's always smart to reduce your lighting a little bit from the normal schedule and then gradually over the next couple of weeks bring it back up to the full schedule. And so because the increase of light could be 10, 15, 20% more power initially with a brand new hot bulb. And so you may need to reduce your lighting schedule a little bit just because you're basically acclimating your reef to new lights. But again, you're going to look at the livestock and decide in that regard and give me more information. It's kind of hard to answer that question. Derby City Reefer says, has he mailed out the DVDs yet? No, they are right there to my right, needing to be mailed. I did not get that done this week. I apologize. But they will. Cindy says, I'm thinking about switching from LED to T5s. You can. And so the downside is that with T5 bulbs, you're normally going to replace the bulbs between 9 and 12 months. There are some bulbs that last longer. Cough, cough, Reef Bright, because his run cooler than the other T5s. And so I would suggest, you know, if you wanted to buy T5s, maybe buy his, because they will last longer. So you get more bulb for the money per bulb. And it's not like his bulbs cost more, they just run better. So that's what he told me. I assume it's true. I don't have any of his T5s. But I did touch them and they were much cooler and I was amazed. Robert Lawrence says he's running LED 90 and he's got 15,000 Kelvin with 100% blue and 50% white and it works like a dream. All right, good. Crisis Film says, we set up the Apex last week. The pH and the salinity probes tend not to read correctly. We recalibrated and they slowly get off again over time. Any tips? pH should be set one and done. So either it's in a weird spot or there's some kind of weird electrical interference happening or they're getting bubbles on the probe maybe, but pH should be rock solid. You set it, you calibrate it, you're done for like a year. And you know, some people calibrate them a little bit more frequently. I don't. I usually wait a year and then I just check them or I replace it. Salinity probe, don't get me started. Mine has never told me the truth and I just kind of ignore it. I have not tried to resolve it. There are a couple of people I know that swear they know the exact method to make it work perfectly. And you isolate that one wire from everything else so that nothing can interfere with it. You make sure it's in a spot with no bubbles. There are some people that put that probe upside down so it faces upward. And they said that way no air bubbles can get stuck on the probe. It's whatever. I have a refractometer. I've got a hydrometer. I can measure salinity myself. So I've not tried to make it work with my Apex. Let's see. Sleestack says, are your bubble tip anemones still bubbling after the increase in light? There's a couple in there that have bubbles, but there's quite a few that look completely like they always have. Christ Kalamanis says, rising pH is at 8.46 right now. What is safe? What do I need to do? It sounds a little high. And you know, what livestock do you have in the tank and why is it going up? What's changed in your tank? We have a goal of 8.3. I do know that once you hit 8.5, your fish are going to start acting a little stressed. Your corals, especially their SPS corals, may start getting stringy and releasing like webs into the water. They're really stressed, and you don't want that. So I need to know why your number went up, and also how do we know that number is accurate? You know, how did you measure it? What's measuring it? And when was it calibrated last? These are all the things you need to know. And again, how's the livestock acting? Hey, Mike, thank you very much for the super chat. Appreciate that. Mike is one of our moderators in Club Milos Reef. Enfield says, I have 2 Gen 4 Radions on a tank that's 5 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot. I have the very blue spectrum, was thinking of turning the white up for the first peak of the day and how much to turn it up at one time. That's really going to be something you're going to dial in. You're going to pick what you like, and you're going to choose the look that you appreciate. Look, the video looped. I didn't have to do anything. How awesome is that? I use I think it's called the Radiant schedule. And if you type into Google Radeon schedule described in Milev, you'll find my article. And it shows all my screenshots of my old programming that pretty much is still the same programming. Macy's daddy says, I have a small amount of cyano that I can't get rid of. I treated the tank twice. Is it seasonal? Should I just wait it out? It is seasonal, but if you have a small spot that bothers you, just clean it out yourself manually. Turn off all the flow in the tank, scoop that area together, siphon it out, be done. Jess says, I'm going to be honest, I feel like the old way you streamed with the tank in the background. I'm not hating, I love your information, I appreciate the live streams. Yeah, no, we're just trying something different because I kind of didn't like the way it looked in the background myself. You know, I kept seeing what you guys were getting and I was like, it just doesn't look good. And occasionally I get a comment from someone saying, you know, you sound like you know what you're talking about, but your tank looks like crap. And I was like, well, go to the 6-year anniversary video and watch that. And then you'll know what the tank really looks like. And they're like, oh my God, you're right. It looks fantastic. Why do we have to look at that? So that's why I've tried to do this instead. And so far, it seems to be working pretty well. Nick Walter says he bought the Senai specifically so he could measure par in the tank, but he discovered the only way to do it is to be connected with a computer. Yeah, I haven't used the Senai, so I don't know that. But if you have a laptop, you should be able to wire it up for that test, or maybe have a friend bring over a laptop and you could do your measurements. Because measuring par, we don't do all the time. We do it sporadically, once or twice a year when we're trying to dial things in. And you know, so it would be like project day, and you get that laptop hooked up and you do your thing. I don't know if there's any other option. I haven't heard that. Let's see. Robert says, if I place my white light at 80%, the temperature raises, hence running at a 50%. Yeah, usually when you run your lights in the white spectrum, LED lights, the fixture runs hotter. The cooling fan comes on, and that is it's a side effect. Just like I was telling you, the fans that come on my algae turf scrubber, while those lights are running and they're trying to grow algae, you hear the fans blowing, and I don't like it. And if you like a nice quiet tank, that's why I kind of have been trying to encourage people, if you're going to run the white light, run it during the daytime when you're not at home, you know, during your work schedule. Now, I realize everyone's at home right now, but normally you'd be at a job, and while you're at the job, the fans are on, it's fine. And if your tank is running warmer because you ran white lights, then your tank needs some more ventilation or needs a cooling fan blowing down on the water. Jamie says, you run the same light over the same size tank as me. And what sort of intensity do you run? I feel mine is too bright for a mixed reef, but I don't have a par meter to test. I believe I've got the Anemone Cube Radeon running at 85%. with the gradient schedule. Like I said, you guys are going to need to find that article. Let me Google that for you. So this is the link you guys are looking for. It's going to be in the chat. And now I lost my spot in the chat. Dang it. Okay, this is where it was. Good. Jose says, I'm planning to get the XHO kit from Reef Bright for my Radeon. What is your thoughts? I love mine. Mine's on right now, the second over the Anemone Cube. And so the Radeon's on and the XHOs are on right now. And the tank looks great. It really brightened the tank up, which is really cool. And that light is a couple of years old, the Radeon. So it was a nice upgrade. And the installation wasn't long. The hardest part for me was that mine hangs from the ceiling. So you're dealing with, I put it, well, there's going to be a video. But I put a box under the light to support it, and then I did all my work, and then I removed the box. That way nothing could fall into the water. Brockton says, do you feel the Kessel 360s have the similar shimmer as the Halides? I've got Kessel 360s with 4 bulb T5 combination. I find it appears very similar. Yes. No, I would. I'd say yes, you will. Because of the way their LEDs are a single point. One of the reasons I ordered the Gen 5 Radeon, I want to see if we still get a shimmer or not, because they have those lights spread across in a zigzag pattern now. And, you know, it's new. I ordered mine months ago before Ecotech shut their doors. So in the meantime now, we are just, you know, waiting. And I was told, I contacted them recently and said, you know, any movement. And he said, well, if you want a XR30, I can do that today. I was like, no, I want an XR15 like I ordered. So he said, you got to wait 2 more weeks. I'm like, then I'll wait. I've waited this long. What's the rush? And I am the king of patience. By the way, this is funny. I'm going to stick it on the screen. So I had someone recently tell me that I should start selling patience in my shop. And I said, yeah, that's a great idea. I should totally do that. And he says, yeah, I'd buy it by the case. I'd use it everywhere for my kids, my job, my fish. I thought that was great. You know, patience is such an important feature of this hobby. You know, being impatient, trying to rush things is a terrible plan and almost never works out well. Dave says, hey, it's my drinking buddy. Dave. Any tips on how to remove Mahanos and clove polyps off the shell of a large clam? I don't want to transfer those pests to the new tank. I need ideas on how to remove it. I've had zoanthids grow up the side of a clam, and I was like, oh, this is going to be a lot of work. And when I reached in to remove them, they peeled right off the shell. They didn't hold on. It's almost like the shell had some kind of a, shall we call it a slick surface? Because the zoanthids didn't hold on. They just peeled right off as a skin. So you might be lucky, and you might have the same scenario with these Mahanos and clove polyps, that they don't have as good a hold on there as you think. But since you have to move the clam from one tank to another tank anyway, and you're taking it out of the tank, while it's out in the air, or you know, out of the water, you can set it down on a towel, you can use some dental tools, and you can scrape off those pests, and then dip the clam and make sure it's nice and clean, and then put it into the next tank. Donald says, I recently picked up the HANA checker for calcium, and when I tested, I got a reading of 508. Is there a way to drop the calcium? Also, does a higher calcium affect the corals? Yeah, 508's kind of high. We want around 375 to 450, so you're not crazy high, but you're a little bit above where we want to be. I would just not dose calcium for a few days and then retest. And if you have another calcium test kit, I would compare it to the one you've got from the HANA checker and just see if the numbers agree. Maybe your tank really is over 500. My tank tends to run about 420 all the time. It never goes up, it never goes down. You know, it's always 400 to 420. Don says that the Crown Royal XO is finished in cognac barrels and it's excellent when the weather is cold, and that the comment of being extra sweet is not correct. Wow, that's weird. Well, I might have to buy a bottle and find out, because I like the shape of the bottle and the ball on top. I was like, that looks kind of cool. But, I really shouldn't be buying a drink because of the shape of the bottle. Cindy is drinking basic Bacardi and Coke. I didn't know Bacardi came in basic. Come on, I had to give you a hard time. That's funny. Lots of drinks here. One person drinking lots of water, sweet tea, Jim Beam, JD Tennessee, Gentleman's Jack, coffee, an IPA, more coffee, apple juice. All right. Who's 7 years old that's in this chat? Apple juice. Amir says, I added the Reef Bright XHO to my Radeon Gen 5s. Well, lucky you, you have one. I saw your install video. What are your long-term usage opinion? Well, long-term, we just keep using it. I don't really have much more of a direction to go with that question. I don't look at lights as temporary. I tend to use them indefinitely and until things are done. And then I just replace it with a new one. And I had a Gen 2 over the Anemone Cube for a very long time. And finally, I replaced with the Gen 4 Pro. And then recently, I added the XHOs. And I had them sitting here for a long time before I actually got them installed. It was one of those things that just I didn't have time to do. And I finally got it hooked up, and I'm really glad. There's a Shiner Bock drinker here. I love Shiner Bock. English tea, Hennessy, vodka. Oh my God. Vodka and Red Bull. That's what they're doing right now. Smoking. Let's see. Eric sent $5 to the super chat for the steak live stream. I am not doing a cooking show here, people. This is about reef keeping. Diet Coke on the rocks. See, I see all your comments. I'm just trying to find the questions. All right, so next question. Daniel says, my coralline algae is dying. My magnesium is 1350, my alkalinity is 8, calcium is 430. Okay, those three numbers are perfect. It's turning white and just flaking off the live rock and glass. So all your numbers are right. I'm wondering if maybe you did a water change and the coralline was exposed to air for a long time, and so now it's flaking off and dying. It will come back, but all your numbers, I mean, magnesium is a little bit low. I like 1400, you're 1350. You're really close. So I would just kind of not sweat it. It's a bummer that you're losing some because obviously you liked getting it, but it does regrow. So I would just scrape off what bothers you, kind of give it a fresh start, and then stay on top of your water. But it sounds good. Maybe your tank is running too hot. Maybe your salinity has changed. But the other three numbers are pretty much where they need to be. So magnesium should be growing. If you want, you can add a product like Purple Up to your tank that actually encourages magnesium growth, coralline growth. And so you can kind of get things back on track with that if you like. It'll make your tank temporarily cloudy when you pour it in. But then, in the next few weeks, you'll just start to see coralline popping up everywhere. Macy's daddy says, your anemone tank is amazing. I started one in November and already have 19 anemones, but it still looks bare. Yeah, I understand that. It just takes time for things to grow in. When I started it, I had a few in there, and it wasn't nearly as full as it is now. And the thing is, I don't share. I am such an only child, and so I don't share. And so it stays full rather than me taking out some and giving them away all the time. And same thing happens with my fungias. I grow tons of fungia corals. And then I'll show up at the frag shop with like 20 or 30 that my reef grew, and I sell them all, which is great. They're gone. And I suddenly can see the sand bed in my tank again for a little while. But right now I've probably got 20, 25 fungias in my reef that need to go. But anemones, I don't share. Nick says, I set up one of my 3 tanks with dry rock for the first time and had nothing but problems. I switched back to live rock, and with hours I saw improvement. Never dry rock again if I can get live rock. Yes, I agree. You knew that. Robert says, have you ever had an issue with your copper band not feeding or not eating? One making its way to my tank later this week. Rumor has it they are troublesome eaters. Yeah, they are. They are troublesome eaters. They are very finicky. They want certain foods. I bought my fish with the food they were feeding that fish that they fed in front of me. So I watched it eat it. I was like, okay, I'll take that fish and I'll take that food. And I went home. And you want to gut load that fish. You want to keep throwing food at it nonstop. No matter what your parameters become, you just keep doing it so that fish will eat. And my copper band, I was buying it red bloodworms, which were frozen, because it's a worm. And they love black worms, but I can't get them here in Texas for some reason. So I was using the frozen red bloodworms that are sold at the fish store. And I thought that way I'm guaranteed to feed the copper band no matter what. But then I noticed one day it was ignoring the bloodworms. I mean, the other fish were eating it, but it was going for the bait for the mini mysis shrimp. I was going to say brine shrimp. Mini mysis shrimp. And I can get tons of mini mysis. And so if I'm in a hurry and don't have time to thaw food and I put in flake food or pellets, I will put that food in the tank and all the fish go crazy and the copper band's swimming around like, where are my mysis? And she really kind of ignores everything and I feel guilty, like, oh, I really should have melted some mysis for her. So it's when you know what the fish eats, you got to make sure you keep giving it and be consistent. And so I always have mysis in my freezer. And it was just that day, it was like right at lights out and I didn't have any time to melt food. You know, the lights were kicking off. I thought, well, she'll get some food tomorrow. But that's not the way to look at it on a regular basis. That was a one-off or a fluke. And I immediately saw my mistake, you know, how important it was that I do that. Reef Keeper says, when the turf scrubber really kicks in and you're getting a nice thick green algae, it takes a bit. Put in 2 little fishies pocket feeder. Oh, feed my tanks the algae? Nope, not going to do that. But thanks for the suggestion. The algae will grow thicker on there now. And the thing I was told, so if you guys are running turf scrubbers, I don't know what your routine is, but I've been really relying on Jason since he made this product and it's his baby. I've been asking him, what are the best approaches? How do I use this correctly? Because I feel like it's his product, so he should give me the advice, and I shouldn't just use anyone's advice that worked with something else because his is designed a certain way. And he was saying it appears the best results is when you clean the screen every 2 weeks. So I've waited, I don't know how long, to get to what you guys saw earlier in the stream, and I pulled out a whole bunch. I was actually kind of excited because for a long time the screen was white and there's just some algae on the perimeter. And then I finally, I guess it was 2-3 weeks ago, I took the stuff off the edges and I rubbed it all over the middle to kind of seed the plastic. And the algae started growing. And you know, I'd check on it every 2 or 3 days. I'd open the drawer and look. I'm like, all right, it's getting there. And then yesterday I was like, okay, that's pretty thick. I'm going to go ahead and pull now. And all I did was I laid the screen on my deck because it's outside in the backyard. And I took a credit card and I just scraped or raked off the stuff. I didn't try to clean the screen. I didn't try to remove it all, like make it pristine. I just scraped off the majority and left a little, I don't know, a brown and green mess on the screen, put the screen back in and put it back in. And that way it has something to work with, so it'll just keep going. So who knows, 2 weeks from now I might have something even more impressive. I've been watching the refugium very closely to see if it's affected, and so far it's not. But well, we'll see in the coming months what happens with the turf scrubber versus the refugium. But no, I'm not going to put the algae I grow in there in my reef. I'm not going to take the chance of releasing algae into my tank. I just bragged you guys about how I don't have algae in my tank. Thomas, I don't know the answer to your question, so I'll put it on the screen in case someone else does. My computer measures redox. Can you say something about it and what is the influence on the reef and the livestock and what are the good numbers? I just don't know. I think you're talking about oxygen reduction potential, which is ORP. And if you're talking about that, I know a little bit, but this is not my strength, honestly. But ORP, which is oxygen reduction potential, which might be redox, I don't know, is a way to measure basically the CO2 oxygen level in the water is the way I understand it. Like I said, this is not my strength, and I'll probably get it wrong, but I'm going to try to work my way through this like I'm on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. I'm thinking my way through it. But if you have an ORP probe in your sump or in your display tank and it's giving you a number of, let's say, 329, 334, 321, and that's pretty much what it always is. Like today, mine was 349, okay? Usually it's around, I'd say mine varies from 325 to 350. And if it drops to 200 all of a sudden, that is my indication something's wrong with the reef. Something weird happened, and either I overdosed something, or something broke, or something's leaking. Who knows what. But when ORP collapses and the number drops, that is our warning. But the rest of the time, it's like a babysitting number. It's sort of like, oh, it's still within range, so nothing to think about. Now, some people want to run ORP higher, and they will use an ozonizer to add a third oxygen molecule into the system. They usually pump ozone directly into the protein skimmer. And this helps the skimmer be more efficient, and it helps reduce algae. I've never run ozone, but I just know from what I've heard from friends. And they had a target of making sure their ORP never went over 425. Basically, if the number got to 425, it would physically, the apex would shut off the ORP, I always say stuff like that. It would shut off the ozonizer entirely until the number came back down to where it belonged. So it'd stay within a target range. So maybe theirs is like between 375 and 425, and they are telling the apex, based on those numbers, turn on or off the ozonizer as needed. And running ozone also helps make the water more clear, but I don't run it. So that's as much as I know on this topic. And I'm going to run to the next question. Jose says my tank, 180 gallon, has bryopsis. About 3 months back, I was treated with Flux RX for about 3 weeks, and it cleared it up. Now it's back, and those that need more time. Oh, does it need more time or more Flux RX? If it came back, you may have to treat your tank again. Or you could, how bad is the bryopsis? Is it just a small area? Because maybe, if it's system-wide, yes, you got to treat the tank again. If it's on a small area, like it came back, like, oh, I see some on that rock, I would take that rock out, I'd put it over my kitchen sink, and I would take a syringe, and I would dribble peroxide over the bryopsis for 30 seconds or so. Then I would rinse that rock in a bucket of tank water, and then I'd put it back in the tank. And within 3 days, that bryopsis will turn clear, turn white, and flake off and be gone. And you don't want it to become system-wide. That's what it was the first place. That's why you finally went with Flux RX. Flux RX. So if you see it coming back, there's something lacking in your tank to eat algae, which would be a cleanup crew. But you can treat specific areas. If there's only a certain couple spots where it's got it, I would tackle it that way. Enfield's asking about his LED lights again. He says, my tank is doing great. The colors are fine. There's no algae. Parameters are on point, but not too much growth, and it's about 9 months old. Well, 9 months old, it's just getting mature. It's just about to take off. But my radions on the bluer side are at 29% intensity. Should I increase it? Yes, you can bring it up a little bit higher. I remember running my radion initially. I just out of the box. I just went, I'm going to go with 75%. And I ran it that way for 2 years, 18 months, something like that. And then one day, I don't know what made me think, I was like, I should increase my intensity just a little bit. And I think it went from 75% to 80%. And suddenly I liked looking at my tank. It just looked so much better. I was like, wow, 5%. That's all the difference it made to make the tank look better to my eye now. I'm mad at myself for not doing it sooner. So yeah, you said everything's doing well and everything's fine, but you're not getting a lot of growth. You could increase it a little bit. Don't do some radical thing from 29% to 80%. But go up to 35%, go up to 40%, see what the tank's doing. Give it a few weeks, see how you like it. And if you see the ability to raise a little bit more, you can. It really would be good to get your hands on a par meter to see what your numbers actually are before you make any major changes. Valhalla says, have you got any fish that initially didn't get along that do get along now? My yellow tangs are called Frick and Frack because since the beginning they always chase each other, and they still do it to this day. And the purple tang will chase the yellow tangs from time to time just because she wants to make sure they know that she's purple. But the rest of the stuff in my tank is really very friendly. Sometimes you'll see the skunk clownfish kind of squabbling, and there's nothing I can do about that. It's a 400-gallon reef, and they are wherever they want to go, and there's a lot of room for them to run. So if there is some kind of a skirmish, I just let them do it. But I still have 11, so it's not been a a fight to the death. It's more like I don't like you anymore. Go over to your side of the tank. And so for a while there, I'll see a clownfish way at the other end of the tank or in the back all by itself, but then eventually it ends up back in the group. So it's worked out just fine. But I'll tell you, some people lately have been buying some new fish, and they post their pictures on Facebook, and I'm like, oh man, I like that one, or ooh, I'd like to have that. And then in the back of my head, I'm like, do I want to risk conflict in my tank? Do I want to risk a disease in my tank? You know, I mean, it's like, is it worth the trouble? I have established fish. I'm happy with what I've got. Do I really want to change the balance, so to speak, by adding somebody new just because I'm in the mood? If I add anything else, it will probably be more anthias, and I would like to do that once I get the nitrates down. And then I'd like to add a mandarin because I haven't had one in a while. I had one for a long time, and then one day I just realized it was gone. And maybe the sea bait ate it. Maybe the red serpent starfish ate it. I don't know. I didn't see it getting starved. It wasn't thin. It just was gone. And it wasn't on the floor. So I don't know what happened. Jose says, who sells the turf scrubber and how much for approximately 180 gallon display? They have, that size is for my giant tank, and that's sold by BRS. And he has made a smaller version that probably fits your 180, but I don't know what it costs. And that would be BRS as well. I think he's only selling to BRS. So you can find him, the turf scrubber is made by 4 Square Aquatics. And you can tell Jason I sent you. Heather asked me some questions here. What are your opinions on the highest flow, the easiest to maintain, the simplest to repair and replace parts for the return and drain plumbing to a sump? What specific fittings would you recommend? Okay, let me think about these questions. I kind of feel like you're talking about everything and not just the sump. But let's just start from the top. You talked about my opinion on the highest flow. If you're going to have a lot of flow, it should be in the display tank, not in the sump. The easiest to maintain will be a bigger sump with less compartments because you have more room to work versus a sump that has like a lot of little nooks and crannies. It's really hard to get things. Like maybe they've put the socks in the back behind the protein skimmer where the pipes come in and you have this lid you have to remove and you can get the sock out barely, but then it's dribbling all over the edge of the sump. You know, those kind of things, I think about logistics of how it works. I just made a sump for a customer here in Texas, and he said, well, if I ever want to run a sock, what can you do? Because I usually don't make a sock holder in my sumps. So I glued one in the very front corner where he could reach in and put the sock. He could do his work in the tank or in the sump. Like let's say he's vacuuming and he puts the hose into that sock and it's in the corner of the sump. And then when he's done, it's right there in the front. He can just reach in, pull it out, go wash it out, and save it for another day. And the rest of the time, it's not in the way, and he still has the bubble tower in the background. He's got the protein skimmer, and he's got space to work. And then you talked about the simplest to repair and replace parts. When you're doing your plumbing on your tank for the drains, which are the pipes going down, and the returns, which is the pipes coming back up, it's always good to make sure you have a union somewhere in those lines if you have to remove something. Like on my big 400-gallon tank, actually in this video right now, at this moment I'm speaking, you can see the 400-gallon in the upper left corner. And then right in that little gap where there's some light shining through, there's an elbow pointing down with a black pipe. That is my return line for the 400-gallon. That's how the water gets into the tank. And right at that spot where the black cover is, that's a union. So I can literally unscrew that union and remove the entire assembly and go clean it and then bring it back and re-screw it to that spot. I try to do that to make my life easier if I ever had to work on it and make it nice and clean. When it comes to your return pump that's in the sump, you want a union on it so that you can remove the pump from the plumbing for easy cleaning and put back into place when you're done, versus something that's more permanent, like something that was screwed on and glued in, and now you're like, oh, I have to cut a pipe to remove this pump. That's a terrible decision. So unions are a really good tool, and I do highly recommend them. A union is a fitting that has a collar that you loosen, and you can take the two halves apart. There's an O-ring inside. Make sure you don't lose that O-ring. And then you can do whatever you have to do, and then you can put the new pump or the cleaned up pump back in, tighten the union, and business is just like normal. And then specific fittings I would recommend. I really like the random flow generators from VCA, which are 3D printed. I sell them in my shop and I use them in my reef. They create a lot of flow in the tank and it's random. So the water is, when you put your hand in front of the nozzle, you can feel the water hitting different parts of your palm because it's not just one straight flow like you'd think from a hot tub. It's actually hitting all these different areas, and you put your hand back, you can feel it, just suddenly you don't feel it, and then you feel it hit again. It's really neat. So that's a great one, but it's got to be under the water at least 2 inches. Usually 4, but 2 inches seems to work. So I really like those. That's pretty much top of my list. I hope that answered a lot of your questions. Halides says, how many months or years is required for a reef tank to be a reef tank? I'd say the first year it goes through a lot of changes and has a lot of problems, and then you kind of dial it in and you can basically see problems from afar and you can handle it. I'd say within a year it's starting to resemble a reef tank. I mean, it technically is a reef tank from the beginning because you're going to grow a reef. You're going to have corals, you're going to have fish, you're going to have sand or no sand, you're going to have rock. You're making a reef tank. And if you have 5 corals or if you have 10 colonies, it's still a reef tank. It's just how old is your reef. And mine has been growing for many years, as you guys know. And at one point, a few years ago, I got Dwayne out here, I flew him out here to help me tear out the corals to make room so that more things could grow. And because I knew I didn't want to do it. So I made him do it. Well, I helped. And I gave those corals away to everybody in the area. Let's see. All-in-one fan, so that makes me think you have a very small tank, said, what fish would you recommend to mow down a carpet of algae on the sand? It's not diatoms, it's a well-established bed. Maybe the lawnmower blenny could help you, possibly, but if it's an all-in-one tank, it's small enough, you could just do this yourself. Sometimes you are the cleanup crew. There's nothing wrong with that. You get in there, you turn off your flow, you scrape, like I always say this, scrape it all together and then scoop it out. Whether you lower a small container in there, like some kind of a bowl or an empty butter container that you got from the supermarket, and you put all the crap in it and lift that thing out and throw it out, and now your tank is cleaner. And then, of course, make sure your cleanup crew is in there. But fish cleaning the sand bed is not a very common thing to see happen. Lawnmower blenny might help. It's more likely you're going to need things on the sand bed that clean sand. Cucumbers, serpent starfish, sand conch, Nassarius snails. These are all sand dwellers. If you were to get one of those sand sifting gobies, the downside is it tends to bury things you care about with the sand it's sifting. It grabs a mouthful, it goes right over that coral you care about, and it just makes a pile of sand right on top of the coral. And if you don't notice it in time, by the time you do, you'll have a dead coral under the sand. So I'm not a big fan of sand sifters. Other than that, that's all I got for you. Like I said, if it's a small tank, you should do it. If it's a big tank, you still can do it. Size doesn't matter, as Yoda says. Ruben says, I have 2 fish in my tank and they have ick. I put one in quarantine, but it's really stressed and rapidly breathing. I don't want to stress them out and die. Should I put it back? Actually, you should put both fish in quarantine or in your hospital tank, and you should make sure that there's plenty of air in that tank. So maybe there's not enough oxygen. You might need an air pump and an air stone. You need to make sure the ammonia is not rising, because that's very important. Fish don't handle ammonia well at all, which is why we complete the cycle before we put the first fish in. So you may need to go ahead and just really dial in that hospital tank and get it just right. And you're going to need to keep those fish in there, treat them for ick for the next, couple of months. And your aquarium needs to be fishless for at least 6 weeks, if not longer, to eliminate putting the fish back in and getting them reinfected with ick again. I'm sorry, ick just sucks, and it's a big waiting game. A lot of people wait 3 months or longer before they put the fish back in the tank to make sure the ick does not get back in, and they make sure no new fish can introduce ick into their tank after that by quarantining. Oh, that's interesting. Larry says, I find that using Reef Nutrition live phytoplankton with the black cap, that's interesting. I've only seen the bottles with the white cap, drops my nitrate to near nothing. This is in a very heavily fed seahorse tank. Dose and then turn the skimmer and return pump off for an hour. Interesting. Hey, I want to see pictures of your seahorses. If you're in Club Mealers Reef, would you post some pictures and tag me? I love seahorses, and I'd like to see what you got. Thanks for the tip. That's interesting. Sizzle Reef says, your anemone cube helped inspire me to get into the hobby. Welcome to the hobby. And I love the video background. Yeah, I love it too. I think it's fun. I think it's so much nicer than what I had before. And I know no one likes change, and trust me, this is extra work for me, but I've had people, see, I hear everything. I don't let things get under my skin necessarily, but I do hear what people say and I think about it. And I've had people say, you know, I really like your edited videos more than those super long live streams. It's just, I know it's easier to just stand in front of a camera and talk than have to do anything. Well, this is a lot more work. Not only am I answering things on the fly, I'm actually editing a video in advance that's, you know, almost an hour long to play in the background, and green screen behind me to give you a picture of a tank behind me instead of an orange wall like last week. So, you know, doing little bits to make it a little bit better, wear a microphone so it sounds clean, you know, all that stuff. It's a little bit of magic. Lithuanian Fisherman says, can filefish go after corals after they are done with aptasia? Got my first bird's nest today. Yes, they can, and the filefish will grab onto an acropora to sleep at night. It kind of like bites on and wedges itself, and so that little spot on the coral could take a hit. But will it destroy every coral in your tank? Probably not. It just depends how many corals you have. But I've seen this one tank. I was visiting someone in California, and they had a nice tank, and they had that filefish in there, and they had algae here and there because they were hard-working people. They worked every single day, both of them, the couple, and so the tank was being kind of, you know, neglected. And so algae was kind of getting out of control, but there was plenty of acros in there, and the filefish was doing its job. And it was causing a little bit of damage, but not enough for them to want to get rid of the fish. I'm trying to read this to understand it. You know, I'm just going to skip it. Anfield asked, I have a pink tip tricolor anemone. Wow. And it's shrunk back into a crevice and gone very small. How can I get him better? You could try target feeding him. Also check on him different times of the day. It may be choosing to open up at a different time of day than you're used to, and that might be your opportunity to give it some food and kind of encourage it to open up. Sometimes you're going to take the entire rock and you have to turn it to get the anemone out toward the light again. Sometimes they make a wrong choice and they go there. I mean, think about it. Sometimes an anemone will choose to go through the overflow box, down the drain, and show up in your sump. Why? The good light is over the tank. Why would it go into the sump where there's nothing? So they're not the smartest critter on the planet, so you may need to assist it. You would think it just knows to go here and it's going to get light and it's going to be fine. It should know to catch food and it's going to eat and it's going to be fine. But sometimes we have to interact and kind of help, and you know, you'll have to get involved. Tim B says, fantastic topic today. What is your opinion about what seems to grow SPS the best? It looks to me from your tank and others that metal halides grow thicker, more robust corals. It's kind of a... Okay, I like the way my tank grows. And Dwayne runs his, now like I said, he's growing it now under radions. And he's got a beautiful SPS reef. He is huge on SPS. He has a few LPS in there and some softies on the bottom. And he's got some frag tanks in the fish room. But he's an SPS nut. And his corals look great, and he frags the hell out of them all the time. Sanjay has a 500-gallon reef, and he's got gorgeous corals in there, and he's all radions, which is LEDs. My friend Ryan has a 1,000-gallon reef that was featured on Untitled Gardens channel, and his corals are unbelievable. It took years, but he's finally there where the tank is like just plating coral. It's fantastic. And I don't mean plating like Monty. I mean plating acros, or just these colonies. And he's been sharing pictures in a group chat that I can't seem to get out of. This chat won't die, and I can't exit it. It's like, what is going on? So I had to mute it. But he's got some beautiful corals in his tank right now. And like I said, it took a long time, and especially with a 1,000-gallon reef. I think the tank is like 10 feet long or 12 feet long by 4 feet wide. That's a huge footprint. You start putting in 2-inch frags. Think how long it takes for a 2-inch frag to look like anything in a giant aquarium. And he's growing those under a bunch of radions. The metal halides just are, they're proven and they work really well. LEDs have proven they work just as well. Think of all the corals that are being grown at Worldwide Corals in Florida. They have an entire facility, just a million radions. They're growing corals that they sell. So it works under that. And then you've got European hobbyists, like in Poland, that grow beautiful SPS reefs under T5s. And so, I mean, they all work. It's just metal halides is just old school. And there are some people that switched to T5s or switched to LEDs, and after several years said, you know what, I'm going back to metal halides. And I thought that was kind of funny, because it just seemed like you'll never go backwards. But some have chosen they want to go that way. And I've had a few people kind of pat me on the back and say, you know, Mark, I kind of like that you never switched. And I'm just, you know, I have the gear and it works. So why change it all out and try to figure it all out when I know this works? So I just enjoy it for what it is. Gun Kiddo says, I just got a Gonny and a frog spawn. When did you get your last coral? Okay, so I have a picture of a coral I got probably a month ago. Let me find it, because I sent it to a friend. Okay, so this is not a great part of my tank, obviously, but whatever. And my fingers are pointing to the 2 frags. So this is one. It's a really nice acro. And it was standing up, and it fell over. And I didn't get my arm wet. I left it alone. And it is branching out, and it is growing just fine on the sand bed at the bottom of my tank. And then this one over here actually is really pretty too. It's a little bit lighter in coloration. I don't really know what color it's supposed to be. It might have a green core and blue tips or purple tips or something. And this coral, half of it was dead. And then the one in the back right there, that ugly stick, that was a Miliopora that didn't make it. So the story of these 3 frags that I just showed you, those 3 acros, I got them home from Ryan's tank, the 1,000-gallon reef I was just talking about. He cut off the frags in front of me, put them in Ziploc bags, and I went home. And I feel like this was December, January, something like that. It was really cold here, and I didn't have a good way to get them home. I threw them in something that was insulated and hoped they'd be okay, but I felt like they got cold on the way home, which was an hour drive. And by the time I got home, I quickly acclimated them to get them to tank temperature, and then I put them in a dip solution. And when I did that, the switch this back on. The corals looked fine. They went through the dip. There was no pests, and I put them in the reef in that spot. And the next day I checked on them, and all 3 were completely white. I mean, white. I was like, what happened? All 3 died, and I was like, God, how cold was it last night, you know? And I just thought, well, that sucks. You know, I felt bad because he gave me some life, and I killed it. But the weird thing is, they didn't die. I think I used way too strong a dip solution, and it wiped out the zooanthellae inside the acrophoras, and so it lost all coloration. They were bone white, but alive. And I just ignored them and left them alone. And the 2 that you saw that are alive, the one on the left was completely, you know, it regained all its color. The one on the right, the bottom half of the acro was completely dead, but the top half was alive. And since it was standing up in the sand, I didn't care because I knew it would grow up and I could trim it and stick it somewhere in the rockwork, which I never did. The one behind it that died, the Millie I talked about, it actually was alive for a good while. I had a few polyps that survived, and I think something stung it, and that was the end of that thing. And like I said, you know, I have to reach into my tank and deal with these things, and I almost never stick my arm in the tank. I just don't. And so these corals have been sitting on the sand, and that one acro that I showed you earlier in the stream that completely died a month ago, I'm going to cut it out, and I'm probably going to take those 2 frags and put it in that spot. And they'll get way more flow and light in that area and probably do really well. But I think that's the last coral I got from my tank. I don't think I got anything since those from Ryan, unless it was a bird's nest from Frank's Tanks. He had a bird of paradise that I like the look of, and that's the one that's behind the acro that died. And it's super fluffy and happy in my tank. Sandbit says, can you suggest a light for a refugium? Again, I keep pushing Reef Bright, so I like the XHO, but if you don't want to use that, they have something called Luma Light that's cheaper. It's very easy. It sits right on top of your sump. It has little legs. Or you can invert the hangers and use some kind of a hanging apparatus, and you can hang it above the refugium. And I've got the Luma Light over the Frag Tank refugium. So that one I think was like $60 or so. The XHO is quite a bit more expensive because it's a more robust light with more intensity. So I hope that helps you. And he's from India, so I don't know if you can get it. Sorry. How are we doing on time? Only 2 hours? We got tons of time. And I've got so much crown. Let's see. I answered that. Tam Hodge says, honest thoughts on adding a BTA to a 24-gallon. My Duncan and my GSP are hating the attention my clowns are giving them. All right. Yes, you can put an anemone inside your 24-gallon tank. The anemone will get bigger and could take up a lot of space in your tank. I started off with one in my 29-gallon, and a 29-gallon is only 5 gallons bigger than your 24. So it is doable. And the way people sell anemones, they sell such small ones, I definitely think you could do it. And hopefully the clowns will like it. Now, if they're already living in the GSP, you know, so be it. The green star polyps, they're, you know, it's a soft coral. And if the clowns like it, why not just let them keep using it? It's not hurting the clowns. They may not love it, but do they really get a vote? I mean, you know, what's more important to you? Are you going to get the bubble tip anemone and get rid of the green star polyps? Because the green star polyps will eventually take over your entire tank if you let it. The Duncans, on the other hand, are a nice coral. They're a nicer coral. And I have a skunk clownfish that lives in 2 of my Duncans, and those things seem to not care because there's one clown. And that skunk is not abusive. It just kind of snuggles in there and looks super cute, like a little submarine going through an ocean of tentacles. Alex says, why did you say only one conch is part of the cleanup crew? The reason I said that, and I didn't go into it, and then I'll come back to the rest of your question, is that you only get one conch per 2 square feet of sand. And the tank we were talking about was small, so I knew it only had 2 square feet, so you can only have one conch. If you were to put multiple conchs in 2 square feet of sand, they will starve each other out and end up dying because there's not enough food to support multiples. All right, back to your question. You said, I'm asking because I purchased 2 back in 2018, and now I have 4. How the heck did you make more conchs? The 2 larger ones and 2 smaller ones. Any chance they reproduced? I don't know. I've never heard of anyone growing conchs. I want to see pictures. Come to Club Meals Reef. Show me what you got. I got to see this. JNY says, my Fluval Evil 13.5 has been overrun by cyanobacteria. How can I get rid of it? I don't have any fish, inverts, or coral. It's an empty tank? There's nothing in there? Restart the tank. Clean it all out. Start fresh. It's a small enough tank you can. Aria says, why don't you write a series of books from the start to end of aquarium reef keeping? I've played with the thought. I've had a few people suggest I should. I just haven't done it yet. But who knows? One day. Malawi says, hi Mark, if you can't get your hands on marine nitrate and phosphate additives, would you resort to something like Seachem's freshwater additives, Flourish Nitrogen or Flourish Phosphorus? Well, I mean, you can get stuff made for the aquarium hobby. Elos sells nitrate and phosphate. Matter of fact, I had a customer that says, Mark, I know you have Elos test kits. Can you get the nitrate and phosphate? I said, I can, yes. But, you know, in the back of my head, I'm like, why don't you just feed your reef and make it dirty? But no, it was an honest question. It did exist. I looked it up. It was something. I contacted my representative from Elos. He says, yes, I can get it, but it's in France. It's not here in the United States. But he was flying to France. So he actually came home with 1 bottle of each in his suitcase, and when he got back to the U.S., he shipped it to me, and I shipped it to the customer. So it took a couple of weeks to get it to the customer. At this point, Elos has, you know, they've got their own facility here somewhere in the U.S. I feel like it's Atlanta, but I don't know. And they have stuff. And odds are, if I needed to put it on the shelf for you guys, I could get it. And you know, Brightwell sells all kinds of products too. And odds are they have some kind of nitrate or phosphate additive, and I could get that and I could add it to the shop. There's going to be something you can use. I know initially, when I was reading some threads on Reef to Reef, they were talking about using tree stump remover, I think, as a nitrate additive. And I was just like, wow, you know, I don't know how they come up with these ideas. I don't know how you're walking through Home Depot and you're looking at a product that kills tree stumps thinking, that could raise my nitrate in my tank. Now, I don't know how that happens, but it did. And people started using that. And they've been using it successfully. I've never done it. I've never needed to, as you know. I have plenty. We joke that I should just bottle up my tank water and sell it to you guys and be a millionaire. Let's see. Joshua says, I made it to the live stream. Can I grow zoanthids with T12 lights? Absolutely, you can. 100%. Tim B says, what two-part do you recommend for those upstarts that aren't ready for a calcium reactor but can get by with colic dosing, or can't? Well, I'm assuming you said can. I sell a two-part product on my website. It's packaged with Frank's Tank's logo on it, and he sells it from his shop, and I do too. And so I have the alkalinity, I have the calcium, and I have the magnesium mix. All three of those are ready to mix up. It has the instructions around the package. You can make your own. You can use a dosing pump and dose it in. You can manually dose it if you want. I use Magnesium Pronto, which is a very, I want to use the word dense product because it goes a long way. And that one is anhydrous and I'm saying it wrong. It's two different kinds of magnesium in that jar somehow. I don't know how they did it. I have no idea. It's a miracle. I love it. I've been using it for 3 years. But yeah, those I do sell both. And I know people are using it. They're very happy with it. And then if it's a small enough tank, I have a product from Brightwell that's been sitting on my shelf that I really want gone. And it's Code A and Code B. And it is the alkaline and calcium bottled stuff. It's already pre-mixed. You just put in the right amount each week. Great for someone with a small tank. And I'd love to get rid of those off my shelf just because they don't move. For whatever reason, you know. Walid says, if I mix frozen food with RODI water in a cup and keep it in the fridge for a week, wouldn't it rot? Yeah, I wouldn't do that. What I would suggest, if you really want to pre-mix some frozen food and thaw it so you can use it a little more frequently, I would have a cup with the food you're going to use and some water, whatever you're going to use. You can use RO water, that's fine. And put it in the refrigerator. And then use that the next day and then put in new frozen food with water in the refrigerator for the next day. So don't try to make a week's worth. If you want, you can, here's another trick. They have these little tiny deli cups that have a lid that snaps on top. You know, like you might go to a restaurant and they have a way for, like with Mexican food, it always has little cups for salsa and for onions and for pico de gallo and the things like that. And you just fill up all these little cups and put lids and go home. And you could fill up each day of the week with a cup of frozen food and put them all in the freezer and put one in the fridge for tomorrow. And it will gradually thaw overnight and all day in the refrigerator, and it'll be mushy and ready to go. And then you can feed your tank that and take the next one out of the freezer and put it in the fridge for the next day. But I wouldn't take frozen food and thaw it and keep it in the refrigerator for a week. I wouldn't do that. Within a few days, you'll smell it and you'll realize how bad it is. Michael H. says, I have a 55-gallon reef tank that's stocked. Can you go into depth about having a higher rated protein skimmer than the size of your tank? I had the Aquamax Cone Q2 rated for a 150-gallon tank. Well, if you oversize your skimmer too much for the tank, typically the skimmer only works part-time. It's trying to pull out dissolved organic compounds, or DOCs. And that, we don't think of DOCs, we think of protein, protein skimmer. So it's catching the proteins on the bubbles and the stuff's collecting in the cup, and then we remove the cup and wash it out. If you have too big a skimmer for the body of water, what happens is the proteins, there aren't enough proteins in the system, so it can't build a good foam head, and it just seems to be like collapsed for a long time, and then, you know, it kind of rises and bubbles some over, and then it collapses, and it's because it's just too big. So it's much better to find something that is closer rated to your tank. And you know, it used to be, we're like, no matter what they say, double it. You know, that's what we did because they just weren't that good back then. But our skimmers are so much better these days. And, you know, the Nio skimmer I have, I love that thing. And the one that they recommended for my frag tank, I felt like it was too small. It was really cute. And I've been running it for years, and I am ready to buy the next size up. And so I can really work in that tank and really kind of get that tank back on track where it belongs. And so I think it's going to need a bigger skimmer. And that frag system is a 60-gallon system plus sump. And the next size skimmer is rated 70 gallons to like 265. So I'll be putting it, but the one I have is just so small. It's doing the job, but the tank's not doing great. I just feel like I need a little bit bigger one. But I would not take, you know, like you said, yours is rated for 150 and you put it on 55. That's 3 times the strength of your tank. And I think that's too much. But you own it and it's working. I mean, is it working? Are you happy with the results? Are you noticing? Because I told you in the old days, they would say whatever you got, double it. So like I had a 55-gallon aquarium like you, and I had the EV200 from Aquasea. And it was a skimmer that uses clover flower injector, clover shaped injector. That's what it's, clover shaped. And it would just, and you could see the foam in the neck rising up. But it would do that thing where it would rise up in the neck and it would collapse. And it would rise up in the neck and it would collapse. And it just didn't matter. You'd open the cabinet and it's like way down low. Close the cabinet, open it later, and it's up high. And close the cabinet, open it up later, and it's down low. And it was so moody. It wasn't like consistently just like always the same amount of foam, you know, with some dirt on top as it occurred. And I just kept feeling like, is this brand specific? Is it this skimmer? Is it because this skimmer is so big for this size tank, you know? And eventually I moved away from it. But yeah, I don't recommend too great an oversized skimmer for a tank. I like something that is more closely matched to it. You know, you can go with tank and a size up, maybe double, but I wouldn't go triple. Hope that answered your question. Trent, where are you getting a haircut? I'm growing a mullet. How did you find a place that cuts hair? Tim says, can you clean, is it safe to clean or soak your salinity probe in vinegar or citric acid? I'd say vinegar's fine. I wouldn't use citric acid, even though I guess you could, because vinegar is a form of acid too. But normally, you just want to brush it off with like a soft bristle toothbrush. The salinity probe has a couple of holes on the side of the tube, and you're actually supposed to put your mouth on the hole and blow any crap out from within the tube, which you do occasionally. And that's part of the cleaning, but you know, and I've used vinegar to clean pH probes, temperature probes, ORP probes. You know, I've done it. But I remember one friend who's, you know, big on chemistry, and he was like, why would you ever put those probes in vinegar? I was like, to clean them? And it's like, I've been doing this for a decade. Now you're acting like I'm doing something weird. And a lot of other people said, oh, I do that all the time. So, go figure. Well, we've reached the end of the video again. Martinez says, Burgundy nudibranchs plus small yellow coarse wrasse. Well, he didn't say yellow, I said yellow. And 2 mandarins. What is your opinion? Aptasia gone or a luxurious snack for the fish? You know, I understand the desire to have fish that will eat the pests and keep them under control. I mean, that's why I got the copper band. I wanted it for Aptasia and Mahano control, which it kind of worked. But I also want to make sure they just have regular food that they can eat besides the one thing they're known to eat so that I can keep it alive long term. But I wouldn't intentionally keep putting more Aptasia in the tank, if that's what you're asking, so that they have this meal. But you have a lot of nice choices. The Burgundy nudibranch can be good. The problem is sometimes they just vanish. You don't know where they are. They wander off and they go somewhere, and I guess they just wither up and die because they never found the next Aptasia. For me, it's just easier to just kill the Aptasia and just enjoy the fish for what they are. Chad says, are the XHOs the same spectrum as the older Tech model? What are the spectrum? Don't know the spectrum. I think it's a trade secret. But the Tech is weaker. The XHO is more intense. I do know that. Maybe it's more wattage. Maybe it's a better LED. But I tried the Tech. I looked at my tank with a Tech light over it, and I was like, eh. And then I looked at the XHO. I was like, now we're talking. So I can tell you that. You can try talking to Reef Bright directly and see if you can get some solid answers on that. But I just know the XHO is a better light. And I have mine really high off the water, like 16, 18 inches off the water, and they still do a fantastic job, where most people would have much closer to the tank, and mine are way up high, so I have room to work in the tank. I mean, if you just look at this picture here, let me stop the video. Look at the background. You can see all that space above my head, and the XHO is way up high, shining down in the tank. And then in the foreground, you can't see it in this picture because it's too close. There's another XHO pointing toward the back of the reef. So I have, a lot of room to work in the tank when I want to, which is ironic. I set up this tank with a walkboard. I gave myself lots of room to work, and yet I don't want to get my arm wet. What is wrong with me, people? That's awesome. McGrath had asked last week, what do I do? The clown's not eating any of the foods I'm giving it. And I said, try flake food. And they said, hey, he's eating like crazy now. That's exactly what I expect to hear. John says, can I use water from my main tank to cycle my frag tank when doing water changes? Yeah, you can actually drain tank water into your frag system and then drain frag system water into your trash barrel, your to throw away. There's nothing wrong with that at all. I've done that in the past myself. I've even done that with quarantine tanks. I would suck water out of the reef to put in the quarantine to refill it with new water and then put the new thing, whether it was a coral or a fish. Okay, Puddle Aquatics says, I wanted to know if you run the circulation pump and heater on your large mixing station at all times. Yes, the circulation pump always runs. Salt water must always be in movement inside my sealed container. And I don't have a heater in there at this time. I ordered heaters, but Cobalt is still waiting to get people back to their offices so they'll ship to me, because I want to put a couple of heaters in that big barrel to make the temperature of the barrel match my reef. It's always a couple of degrees less than my tank. Now, if I did a small water change, it wouldn't matter. But if I want to do a decent one, I want the temperatures to be the same in both. That's why I want the heater. And I've been waiting for those to come in, and they haven't. So that's on hold. But even if I did run, I do run the circulation pump all the time. I wouldn't run the heater all the time. I would run the heater probably the day before I need it. So it would have time to work on it. But then if I'm not going to do a water change for forever, a month or so, then there's no reason to heat the water for an entire month. It'll be, the ambient temperature of that vat is probably 75, 76 degrees, essentially close to the temperature in the fish room, around the clock. So I don't need to heat it. But if I was going to do a water change tomorrow or in 2 days, it'd be smart to hit a switch and get the heater running. And I don't know, I might even be able to do something neat in Apex and tell it, turn on the heater on, let's say for example, if I could be this organized, wouldn't that be nice? If I could be this organized, like I'm gonna do a water change on Wednesday, I could actually tell the Apex to turn those heaters on Monday and Tuesday to run for a day or two. You can actually tell it day of the week, and it'll, you can have it so it only comes on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, or whatever you want to pick. So I could do that and use that command. And the command is actually day of week, DOW. And then you tell it the letter. It's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, that thing, and just pick your day. So I could pick a couple days, and it would have a couple days to warm up. If it was a big vat, if the vat was half empty, I could just do one day because there's a lot less water to warm up. And I could tell it just come on Tuesday. And then on Wednesday it's ready for a water change. So I could do that. Very important that you guys know, has nothing to do with this question. If you're doing water changes, make sure your heaters are turned off or unplugged during the water change. There's too many people that have a heater explode because they exposed it to air while it was still plugged in and they forgot. So please always remember your heater should be somewhere where it's completely submerged. In my sump, you guys saw the picture a while back where I put my heaters in a little acrylic rack between my baffles. The water between the baffles is always full no matter what I do. If I do a huge water change, I suck out all the water out of the skimmer zone, I suck out all the water out of the return zone, I take water out of the refugium. It wouldn't even matter. The water in the triple baffles is still full to the top, so the heaters are completely submerged the whole time. Even though that is the way it's set up and it's safe, I still have a button that when I'm ready to do a water change, I can hit it, and it will kill the power to the heaters, to the return pump, to the skimmer, to the alarms, to the alerts, to the probes, to the top off. Everything's disabled for 45 minutes. And then it gives me plenty of time to change water out, and then it'll all come back to life again after the timer is hit 0. So, but yeah, don't forget to make sure your heaters are unplugged if you're not that programmed for it. Nicholas says, thoughts on using a digital refractometer? If so, which one? A lot of people like the one from Hanna, and the only thing is you have to use their calibration solution for their meter, and you have to use it frequently. I mean, almost weekly to keep it accurate. So there is that. Wilkins says, is there any other nitrate remover I can use or dose? Please not the Red Sea, no pox. You can use vodka. There's an article on my website, Vodka Dosing Why. That's the title. You can Google it, Vodka Dosing Why Milev, and Google will take you right to my article. And it'll teach you exactly what you need to know, and you can dose vodka. Vodka dosing may lead to cyanobacteria, but you will not get the slime you saw with no pox. Ethan says, just use Phosphate RX, and it did everything you said it would. I love it. Great stuff. Actually, I said I love it. He said LOL. My yellow tank didn't seem to mind it at all. Yes, that's awesome. Also, that Phosphate RX video is still hilarious. Yeah, I did a really long intro for that video, and I did it long on purpose because it was supposed to be annoyingly long, and people got mad at me. They're like, oh my God. And I was like, no, that was supposed to be the point. It was a whole confessional. You're supposed to live through it and think how much it sucks. Yeah, no, that was a fun video. Thanks for the comment. Appreciate that. Let's see. Justin says, I have 2 Reef Bright lights. One is a 30-inch XHO actinic light. The other is a 50-50 XHO. Can I use this for LPS and Zoetank? Absolutely. You could I'd put the XHO actinic in the front, and I'd put the 50-50 behind it. So when you're looking at the tank, you're looking through the blue into the white blue. And I think you'll really like that look, and that would work out really well for your Zoetank. Tim Attell says, what are your thoughts on blennies for cleanup crew? I just get a blenny because they're pretty. You know, they're fun to look at. There's one out there called the Starry Blenny. Oh, it's gorgeous. I want that one so bad. I've never seen one for sale. But I really like it because they're very, what do you call it? I can't think of the word. They're like puppies, you know. They're just so, I can't think of the word. Anyway, I like them. But for algae control, and no guarantee. But just to be in your tank and be fun and enjoyable and cute. I mean, there's different kinds of blennies. There's the ones that are really small. I think they're called bicolor blenny. And they hide in a hole and they stick their little face out and they look like they're smiling. And then, you know, there's the lawnmower blenny, which is fine. Personable, that's the word I was looking for. And then the Starry Blenny. It's got like red dots on its face. It's gorgeous. It's such a beautiful blenny. Those are the ones I like. Nick, thank you very much for the super chat. Wow, that was nice. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Corey says, how do fungias grow? Do you frag them? Okay, so I have a specific species of fungia. I think it's species. I always get that term wrong. I've got a good friend that says it's not a species, it's a type. I'm like, all right. Anyway, the one I have is a green fungia. And if it dies and you leave it alone, it will regenerate babies that will bud out between the dead skeleton, and you'll have more. And I have 2 parent dead colonies in my reef that bud out babies on a regular basis. And in this video right now, the middle of the screen, you can see the yellow tang, and the yellow tang is pointed right at the fungia colony that's under that scrolling pavona. And there underneath on the sand are some of the fungias that popped off and have grown quite large, and are moving their tentacles in the flow of the water. And then in the back of my reef, there are, like I said, 20 or 30 more, and another one that's popping off babies. And I've never fragged them, I've never had to. It's just this weird Lazarus type of coral that if it dies, it buds out babies. Now, unfortunately, the bright orange, gorgeous ones with the green mouths, they don't do it. So if you lose one of those, you just lose it. You could leave that skeleton in your tank for 2 years and never see a baby bud out of it. But this one, it makes babies. And so I've had an unlimited supply of fungias for a decade. Chevy Fish says, do you plan on fragging your anemones? Nope. Matter of fact, in my anemone video, I say how I would never do that. Lithuanian Fisherman says, do you have any tips on diving into SPS? I have mainly LPS in my reef. Okay, so if you go to my Critter ID section of my website, the very first item in the SPS section is an article about SPS care. And you should read that entire article. And then once you're done reading that article, it's in the Critter ID, SPS section, there'll be the article, read that. After you're done, then you should watch my video here on this channel about SPS care. And between those two things, then you'll have enough knowledge to tackle this new challenge and hopefully do so successfully. Untarnished Thought says, are you ever going to get a bigger tank? This is the bigger tank. What are you talking about? I went from a 280 to a 400. You guys. This is my dream tank, so no. If I do anything else, which I don't have a plan to, but if I had to make a change, I might do basically the same tank again that's taller, that sits on the floor, and put the sump behind it in the fish room. And that way I could walk up to the tank and I could enjoy it from above every single day. And then if I want to, I can sit down on the floor and I can enjoy it with my grandson. And we can just look at it, you know, from a nice floor view. And when I'm sitting in my chair, I will have that downhill look at the top of the corals in the reef because the tank is down lower instead of up high on a stand. So that is something I've been playing with. I think would be really cool. Sort of like a lagoon tank, sort of, but not really. And the thing is, to look down at the tank from above is impossible because of the flow, the ripples. So I'd have a button, which I already have, a feed button, and it kills the flow for 10 minutes. And I would just use that button when I walk up to the tank. I would actually do this. I would have a button that stops the flow in the tank, and then I would have it also, somehow with a motor, lift the lights up higher away from the water so they're out of my way so I can actually look in the tank, lean in, and really get a good look. And then when the timer elapsed, the lights would come back down, the return pump would resume, and it's all back to normal. I would completely automate that. That would be my cool goal. I would really enjoy that because the view from above of the reef, we don't see it enough. You guys are not seeing it enough. I know you're not. Last week, the video I used, I showed some footage from above as far as I recall, and I did some from the sides, of course, as well. But the top view is the best view of almost every reef. Think about it. When you buy frags of corals, they always look at them from above. You almost never buy a coral that's taken a picture from the side. It's always from above because it's beautiful. So I would like to do that. Tom says, my powder brown is chasing my Achilles all day long 24/7. Should I put him in timeout? Yes. I'm surprised because the Achilles is usually the more dominant of the fish. And the Achilles is a really hard one to keep alive. So yeah, the powder brown should be pulled out for now. And you may need to rearrange your rock work a little bit and then put the powder brown back in. And that way the territories have been kind of messed up and it won't recognize home. And maybe the aggression will drop. Donald says, are you currently building and shipping ATO reservoirs? I'm currently in the market. Yes, I just did a few this week. I posted a picture on Instagram. Here, I'll show you guys one. Pull this up. I did 2 went out this week. 1, the customer picked it up, which was awesome. I love that. So we'll go back here to camera. So this one here, I don't even know how many gallons it holds, maybe 14 gallons. This one here fit inside his stand perfectly in front of the sump, and he uses a Tunzi osmolator. And then, just 1 second. Got to find the second picture. Oh, I got a couple more pictures of that same one, sorry. So here's that. See it from the side, from above. This is the access port to pour water in manually. And then this little one here is skinnier. It holds 9.3 gallons of water. The lid is actually clear. That's just got the protective film so it won't get scratched during shipping. And this one here was 22 inches tall, 20 inches front to back, and 5 3/4 inches wide. And I like this cool reflection shot. It's cool. You can take like the top off container, or I can have my iPhone sitting on the arm of my chair and look at the reflection of the tank on my iPhone, and the tank looks even better because of the dark black glass. It's really cool. So that's a couple I made this week. And yeah, no, I definitely am in the, let me know. All you have to do is send me an email, sales@milosreef.com, and I'll take a look at it and give you a quote, and we'll make you something nice. Josh says, are copepods like cockroaches? Where you see one, there are 1,000 more you don't see. No, copepods are very small, and usually we want as many as we possibly can get in our tank. And in a tank like this one right now, the anemone cube, there's nothing in there that eats copepods. And so if I don't clean the glass, there will be lots of them all over the glass because there's 0 predators in there, which is really nice. But I don't think it's going to be, amphipods might be more likened to cockroaches than copepods. And Charles says, when you want more fish, that means you need another tank. Yeah, I know. It would be cool to set up another tank of some kind, I guess, somewhere. Two Gay Reefer says, I finally made the live stream. Where have you been? I haven't seen you in forever. Aqua Splendor says, should I buy a spectrometer for $3,000? No! What are you trying to test? Let's see. I would like to get a microscope. I think that'd be kind of fun. Scott says, I ordered new rock as I recently moved houses and noticed some of my rock has turned white. Does that mean it's died? Well, you didn't say what kind you ordered. Did you order live rock? Where did this rock come from? A lot of our rock goes through different phases too, so I can't really say what's happened. I don't know. Cindy says, is the XHO Reef Bright LED? Yes, it is. And do you sell them? I can. I haven't done it, but I can. It's just a matter of me getting it set up. Two Gay Reefer says, have you ever thought about moving the return pipes, the random flow accelerators, to the corners so they don't block the view? They'd still block the view. I wish they were invisible. That would make me really happy, but they are what they are. It's I can take them out and clean them so they're like brand new, and then they look a little less obtrusive. But as they grow algae on them, sort of like that, if you're looking in this video right now, in the background is a Vortec MP40, and it's got a 3D printed cover that went over it to keep the anemones out that someone made for me. And it's covered in coralline, and it kind of blends in. So if I just ignore it and let it kind of grow some algae on it, I noticed that Spock and the purple tang and the yellow tangs are always nibbling at whatever's on those return lines. So in a way, it's okay. I mean, ideally, I'd like to have nothing in the tank and still have magic flow everywhere. But unfortunately, we're all stuck with something. But moving them into the corners wouldn't change the view because they'd just be closer to the front and closer to the back instead of where they were in, that end view. Not really much of a chance of changing anything else. Kevin says, oh my God, you're in 2 places at once. What is this, black magic? It's the power of editing. And I know, it's funny. I had to go through this footage and see if I appeared in it anywhere. It took a long time to edit this video. That was a 23 gig file when it was all compiled. Green City Aquatics says, do you have any shrimp in any of your tanks? If so, do you dose iodine to help them molt? I don't believe I have any shrimp in any of my tanks at this point. I had a cleaner shrimp in the frag system, and just one day I just didn't see it. But yeah, dosing iodine once a week is a good way to help them molt. Thanks, Art. I appreciate that. He said the tank looks fantastic and I love the new setup. Oh, great. Larry posted those pictures in Club Mueller's Reef. Thank you so much for doing that. I'll be looking for those. Martinez says he killed a big aptasia with F-aptasia. Now he has dozens of little ones everywhere. That is very unusual. If you covered it completely, like you were frosting it so that way nothing could survive, I don't know how you get babies. That is really odd. I've not heard that from anyone but you. Ron, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Anfield says, from what I'm saying, I was running my radions before with a blue at 29% for 12 hours. Would it be okay to change to your schedule? Or can I change it back if corals don't like it? Yeah, of course. Yeah, if you try something new, just realize that whatever you do, it's going to take weeks or a month or 2 months to see how the tank was affected by your decision. It's not something where you can say a day from now, oh yeah, they don't like that, or a week from now, they don't like that. It's a gradual thing. So as you switch from one thing to another, you just need to really observe things and see what's going on and see what you can do to tailor it. Like I said, with yours, you've had a certain schedule work for a long time. I would just make some minor changes and kind of maybe change slightly toward what I'm doing to see if you like that approach and see how the livestock does. And you can keep gradually changing it week after week after week until you finally have converted it over, like 8 to 12 weeks from now. You could do that. But to just take your schedule and throw it away and put my schedule in instead and just hope it all works out, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't expect a miracle out of it. But it's possible your corals won't even care a bit. You know, that's really a tough one to call on. But I mean, still, even if the corals weren't happy for a few days, like I said, the anemones, like at the top of the tank here in this video, when I put on the XHOs, I just plugged them in. And I put them on the same timer as the other XHOs. I didn't give them an acclimation. I just ran them. And all the anemones went down to get away from the light. And then a few days later, they worked their way right back up where they were. Like, okay, never mind. So I thought it was interesting that they all retreated, but then I thought it was interesting that they came back up too. Yeah. Michael says, how often do you need to dose Live Rock Enhance? 2 times a week should suffice. If you want to do it just once a week, you could, but twice a week is usually recommended. I'm thinking about buying a crosshatch trigger. Are they totally reef safe, and are they hard to keep? Are they aggressive, etc.? You need to ask someone else that has one, because I don't have one. Cindy, yeah, of course you can order one like that. You can order whatever size you like. Let's see. By the way, speaking of the nozzles, you know, we had talked about, you know, like in the video right now in the upper left corner, you can see one of the nozzles coming down. Because I have the ability to unscrew the union that holds that plumbing there, I could physically take it completely out and just not have a return pump running for a little while for some really nice pictures. And then put it right back into place and tighten the union and be right back in business. But moving it more to the left or more to the right, it's still going to be in my side view. You know, it's not going to be out of sight completely. It still exists. It's plumbing. Just realized I never switched the camera over here. It's been that stupid picture the whole time. My mistake. There we go. There we go. No one told me. John says, update, the MP40 is running properly. That's awesome. I want to know what happened. I haven't been on Facebook yet, so I haven't read the rest of your thread. I'd love to know what happened. But I love Reef Crest. Remember, I mentioned that in your thread. Like, if you put it in yellow mode, that's Reef Crest, you will set a maximum intensity, and then it'll just kind of like the stock market bounce across the water with surges and lots of flow, a little bit of flow. I mean, it's pretty intense. I like that one the most. But my own schedule on both of my tanks is actually 4 or 5 different modes throughout the day. So I went into EcoSmart Live because you said you didn't have the Reef Link. You aren't using the app. You were just doing it through the buttons on the actual controller. But when you upgrade to EcoSmart Live, you'll be able to choose all kinds of different choices. You could have a wave mode for an hour, nutrient export mode on Sunday. You could have lagoon mode during the evening when you're feeding and then switch it to Reef Crest during the daytime. You could have constant flow during the night. You can actually dial in all these things, all different intensities, all different patterns. There's a lot that pump can do. Mark says, are all your bubble tips from a single bubble tip? No, they're not. There's 3 different species in my tank, and each one has its own color. Mello, thank you very much. He said he's been watching the channel for years, and the content is amazing. I like that. No, I've never tried using Vibrant. I've never needed to. So I have to have a need. So I haven't. That's the one thing I know nothing about. D says, I love the 7-inch filter sock holder. I'd love to get 2 side by side. Can you contact? Yeah, contact me. Send me an email at sales@milasreef.com and we'll discuss. Are you talking about my sock holder sock box that I made that's modular for my sump? That thing is super awesome for when I need to run a sock, but I take it out when I don't want to run it at all. And it worked out exactly as I hoped. I was so impressed. I know this sounds super arrogant, but I was so impressed with myself when it worked because I had a thought, like, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to design it this way, and I think it's going to work. And it did. And I was like, oh my God, it worked exactly like I hoped. There was no downside. It did exactly what I hoped. I was so pleased with myself. And it was just nice to have that. I could put that one in the win column, like, check, did it, got it right. It made me so happy. So yeah, that thing's great. I keep it in the fish room, nice and dry. And then when I need it, I just pick it up. Matter of fact, I have multiple items out of acrylic in my fish room, and they get dirty. The fish room just salt creep, humidity, dust, I don't know, and things aren't pristine and new. And I'm like, man, I want a cabinet in this fish room where I put all my acrylic things with a door, and I can open the door and take that item out and use it, whether it's my viewer to take pictures, or it's my top-down photo box, or it's my work tray, or it's my sock box. I like everything nice and tidy. Instead, I usually pick the thing up, walk in the kitchen, rinse it down, dry it off, put it where I need to use it, and put it into play. And it'd just be nice if I could, I don't know. I need a butler. That's what I need. I need a butler. Hey man, I'm on top of it. I'm at the end of the list. I have literally caught up with the end of the chat. I'm so impressed. It's so hard to usually do that. I work my way through it, and I guess you guys ran out of questions. Maybe that was it. Guess it's time for a second drink. This drink's been brought to you by Crown Royal Reserve. Yeah, I noticed the blue glow. I don't know why it's doing that. It's kind of annoying. I tried a couple of different things trying to put some backlight on me, and it didn't help. So I was like, all right. Can detritus in the sump cause phosphates? Al915 asks. I don't think so. There was actually a speaker years ago that came to speak to our club, DFW Mass. And when she did her name was Sandy. When she gave her presentation, she was actually encouraging us to quit cleaning our sumps out and leave it alone and let all that stuff happen. Let the detritus build up, let it fill up with worms and bugs, and let those guys just do their thing, like a cryptic zone. And she was talking about all these cool creatures that were in there. and micro brittle starfish and stuff. And I liked her presentation, but then I said, but I'm not doing that. I'm never going to do that. I remember taking the time once a year, maybe once every year and a half. I would actually turn off the flow to my entire system, and I would take a 1-inch hose and I would put that hose down inside the overflow box to siphon out all the detritus around the 2 plumbing pipes, the drain and the return, because that was all filled up with crap, and I wanted that out of my system. And every couple of years, I'd clean out my refugium completely, remove all the sand, rinse the sand, reset, and then put the plants back in after they were rinsed off really well, and just make it clean. And I would clean the sump, and I clean my sump probably every 2 months right now. If detritus kept building up, it's decay. It can lead to nitrate and phosphate. And I'm removing it, so it's kind of odd that I even have nitrate and phosphate in my tank. I really don't understand why I do. I don't feel like I'm overfeeding. And I've noticed that all my auto feeders, all my Eheim auto feeders, are basically empty. So they're not adding food to the tank like they were. So anyway, we're going to see what this turf scrubber does. It would be really cool if it just kept ripping out all the nitrates out of the system. And then if they do, to where they get nice and low, and I don't want to strip them down to nothing, obviously, I might reduce the light on the turf scrubber from 12 hours a day. Maybe I'll go down to 8 hours a day or 6 hours a day, which would be kind of cool, right? And that way it's doing its job, but it's not stripping the system completely bare. If I lose my refugium, I'm going to have a new area in the sump where I can put something different. And I told you guys I was thinking about what could I put down there instead. And I like the idea of a lot of sand and then garden eels. I thought that'd be really neat. But I don't know if that's an option or not. Mark says, your Trident reagents 6-month supply is $11,000 on your website. That is because I don't have any, and it's priced not to sell. If you actually click on it and go into it, it says it right there in bright yellow, not for sale, because people kept buying it even though you couldn't get it. And right now, there are a lot of websites that sell the 2-month kit, but the 6-month kit isn't available because Neptune hasn't reopened yet. So everyone that got 2-month kits, that's all you can get for now. And I need to stop it. I did the same thing. The Versa pump is $1,500 on my website. Because on my current website, if I delete the item, I delete the pictures, the description, the SKU, the dimensions, the weight, everything. And I have to rebuild it from scratch. The next version of my website that's in production right now, I asked them to give me a hidden category where I can move things out of sight when they're gone. And that way, everything's there and I can just move it back into, make it visible again when I have product. And because, whatever. But that's what I did for now. So yes, no, I'm not trying to make $11,000. I am trying to get you not to buy it. Thank you, Kay Miller. I appreciate that. I can't wait to see the seahorses. That's awesome. Tom says, will an Achilles tang and a powder brown tang bully a copper band? I don't think they would. Completely different fish. I don't know. Have you seen that happen? You know what? We are at the end of the questions and we're coming up on 3 hours. I say we just stop so I can take a break. I appreciate you guys tuning in for another long live stream. I'm glad you enjoyed the background video. I think that's more fun. And this thing behind me, this green screen, gave us a fake reef in the background too, which was nice. I don't know. I think we've kind of found a good sweet spot for this. And I hope this next week goes well. Some of the stores are opening up again in our area. We'll see how that goes. I hope you guys stay safe. I hope you test your water today. I got on your case about it earlier. Please do test your tank. It is Water Test Saturday for a reason. And make sure you post those parameters and let's see how they look. You can put them in Club Milos Reef. You can put them on Instagram. Anytime you want to get my attention on the web, just do @MilosReef and hopefully I'll get the tag. It'll notify me and I'll come check out what you're doing. And I hope that you guys have a great week and I will see you next Saturday. Bye.